Hi, it's Katrina. 2025 was a big year for archaeology. Technology like AI, LiDAR, and drones has helped us find more than ever before. This video is a recap of all of the biggest archaeological bombshells I covered this year, from lost cities in the Amazon, new Nazca lines, tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, and more. Think of this as the definitive 2025 archaeological highlight reel. All of the best finds all in one place, so you don't have to hunt them down. Get ready for the best finds unearthed this year. New discoveries in Pompeii. If there was ever a place that could drop jaws 2 millennia after its doom, it's Pompeii. And just when archaeologists thought they had dusted off all of its secrets, this once bustling Roman city just shouted back from beneath the ash, "Hold my amphora." Archaeologists in Pompeii find new crumbling villas all the time. But this year, they uncovered a once-in-a-century jackpot, a private luxury bathhouse so complex, so opulent, it makes modern-day spas look like high school locker rooms. I'm talking hot, warm, and cold rooms, frescoes so fresh they look like they were painted last week, and a plunge pool big enough to host a toga party for at least 30. Caligula would have approved. Located at the heart of a massive residence that's been under excavation for the past 2 years, this newly uncovered lavish bath suite has archaeologists buzzing. Dr. Gabriel Zuchtriegel, director of the Archaeological Park of Pompeii, told the BBC it's almost like the people just stepped out for lunch. Except, Mount Vesuvius annihilated them. The bathhouse includes a changing room with vivid red walls and intricate mosaic floors. From the changing room, guests would strut or awkwardly shuffle in sandals into the hot room, where they could sweat it out thanks to underfloor heating powered by a blazing furnace. Remember, this is 2,000 years old. Next up was the warm room, a place to get slathered in oil and scraped clean with a strigil. If you don't have a strigil at home, I guess you should get one. They were bronze squeegees used by rich people to scrape off their worldly filth. And finally, the grand finale, the frigidarium, aka the cold room. It featured a plunge pool so massive that 20 to 30 people could soak, sip wine, and gossip about who was politically stabbing whom in the forum. But here's where this whole luxury tale takes a dark turn. While digging around the back rooms of this Roman mansion, researchers discovered 2 skeletons, haunting relics of that awful day in 79 AD when Mount Vesuvius let loose hellfire. One was a woman between 35 and 50, clutching jewelry and coins like she was heading to the world's last Black Friday. The other was a young man, possibly a slave, holding keys. Both had barricaded themselves in a tiny room, but sadly, they never stood a chance. According to Dr. Sophie Hay, the man was crushed when the wall collapsed during the pyroclastic surge. The woman, still alive, likely watched it happen before the room filled with superheated ash. This is a terrible story, tragic and brutal. It's so easy to forget, looking at the ruins now, just how horrible the death of Pompeii really was. The mansion wasn't all steam, scandal, and slow death by volcano. Maybe quick death. Archaeologists also uncovered a prayer room painted a serene shade of blue and scattered with oyster shells. Why oyster shells? Turns out they were ancient Rome's answer to Pinterest DIY. When ground up and applied to plaster, oyster shells made walls shimmer. It was like turning your wall into a holographic card. Elsewhere, archaeologists found a banqueting room with jet black walls and exquisite art, which was probably used for feasts, philosophical debates, and passive-aggressive dinner parties. This massive dig, the largest in a generation, is currently wrapping up, but new surprises keep surfacing. More stuff could be found this year. But even if it's not, you'll be able to visit this mansion in the future when it opens to the public. And now for a quick break, because I wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to Kay Jacobson and Elizabeth Atkinson for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your day. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. The lost highways of the Inca. The Inca had a secret subway, and we just found it. Deep beneath the cobbled streets and alpaca-filled alleys of modern-day Cusco in Peru, something ancient has been hiding in plain sight. Something vast, twisted, and straight out of an Inca-themed escape room. Turns out, the old Inca capital has been sitting on top of an underground labyrinth called a chincana. In English, it means place where one gets lost. And honestly, that name slaps because this newly uncovered tunnel system makes the Minotaur's labyrinth look like a hedge maze for babies. Led by archaeologists Jorge Calero Flores and Mildred Fernandez Palomino, the team behind this Indiana Jones-level discovery dropped the news like it was buried treasure. Using ground-penetrating radar and some good old-fashioned detective work with 16th century manuscripts, they found a hidden underground network with not one, not two, but 3 winding branches. Each branch stretches out from Cusco's legendary Temple of the Sun and leads to key landmarks. One bears toward Calispuquillo, another snakes behind the Church of San Cristobal, and the third winds its way through Muyucmarca, part of the formidable Sacsayhuaman fortress, which, by the way, looks like it was designed by a civilization that played Jenga with boulders the size of your apartment. The whole region around Cusco is one massive ancient mystery. Now here's the kicker. These tunnels were carved with intention, like the Inca version of secret metro lines. Archaeologists suspect they were used to connect sacred and administrative hotspots in the heart of the empire. The tunnels were likely used by royalty, priests, and other VIPs to get around while avoiding the people up above, the peasants. How did Flores and Palomino figure it all out? Well, a big shout out goes to an anonymous Jesuit in 1594 who left behind a very detailed journal. His writings mentioned that the Chincana was left untouched when the Church of the Society of Jesus was built in the 1570s. The colonizers built a church and never noticed the giant tunnel below them, or they knew about the tunnels and just didn't care. Cross-referencing that 400-year-old clue fest, the team located the Chincana's entrance in the Rodadero sector. From there, the tunnel slides past the Colcampata Palace, creeps under the city, and heads toward the convent of Santo Domingo, which was also an ancient Inca site. All the while avoiding modern plumbing like it's dodging spoilers for a show you haven't finished. This find isn't just a cool side quest in Peru's archaeological legacy. It underscores Cusco's epic importance as the nerve center of an empire that stretched across South America. And the best part? The story is not over. This labyrinth could prove to be the biggest Inca discovery of the decade. Excavations will continue throughout this year, so who knows what else is hiding beneath the stones? Ancient artifacts, a forgotten Inca subway map, El Dorado with better lighting? Let me know what's on your bingo card in the comments. Crowns and scepters in the walls. Normally, the discovery of one ancient jeweled crown is enough to get people excited, but this time it was a whole room full of treasure. In the cold stone belly of Vilnius Cathedral, behind a staircase and a forgotten crypt, archaeologists opened what might as well have been Europe's most stylish time capsule. Inside, they found crowns, scepters, medallions, orbs, and rings. Basically enough royal bling to make a dragon jealous. This wasn't just some random jewelry stash. This was the hidden treasure of the Lithuanian-Polish monarchy, tucked away in 1939 at the dawn of World War II. Desperate not to lose their artifacts to the Nazis, the monarchy wrapped it all up in newspapers, then hid it so well they lost it for 85 years. Some people were starting to think the treasure didn't even exist. In the chaos of the war, it's no surprise that no one returned to recover the treasure. A team of experts was invited to poke around the cathedral's subterranean level using endoscopic cameras to peek between the cracks. According to Archbishop Quintaras Grusas, the site revealed a secret hiding place where royal regalia had been hidden during the war. The regalia was custom-made, not taken off the heads of royalty. They were created specifically to rest with the dead in their royal tombs. When a king died, they would have a crown of gold placed on their head, and then they were laid to rest. But just because these were funeral crowns doesn't mean they were any less opulent. Just like the pharaohs of ancient Egypt that were covered in gold for the afterlife. Believe me when I say the treasure is worth a fortune. Among the unearthed treasures is a crown belonging to King Alexander, who ruled Poland from 1501 to 1506. There's also royal regalia connected to Elizabeth of Austria and Barbara Radziwill, the first and second wives of King Sigismund II Augustus, the guy that everyone won't stop talking about in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Barbara Radziwill, a noble Lithuanian woman, was already a widow when she became Sigismund's mistress. Their marriage was pure tabloid gold. Nobles freaked out and called her promiscuous and unfit. Say what you want, but she made it to the top. The crowns and scepters are only part of why this awesome discovery has made this list. The most exciting part was the hunt. Everyone knew the treasure existed. Historians had records of it and everything, but it still took nearly 9 decades to crack the right wall open in the cathedral. At the start of World War II, someone really walled up these trinkets like that creepy guy in Superstore. If you don't know who I'm talking about, just watch the show. These crowns are linked to the historical and political soul of Lithuania and Poland, taking us back to when the two were one powerful juggernaut ruled by dynasties like the Jagiellons and Habsburgs, household names in history. And now, once again in the headlines, the treasure was pulled out of the wall some months ago and is currently undergoing restoration, and will soon go on public display. If you've ever wanted to stare down a crown forged for a king's afterlife, or check out the scandalous sparkle of a duchess who defied royal norms, 2025 might be your year. The original Magna Carta. It's a $27.50 miracle. It's not every day you find one of the world's most important legal documents just sitting in your office like it's a takeout menu from 1946. In fact, it's not something that's probably happened ever until now. 2 British historians went rummaging through Harvard Law School's archives and stumbled upon a copy of the Magna Carta. Only it was no copy. It turned out to be the real 725-year-old deal. Now, if you don't know what the Magna Carta is, don't worry. I've got a grade A recap for you. The Magna Carta was first issued in 1215. It was the document that told English kings they are not above the law. It's the blueprint for concepts like due process, habeas corpus, and basically every democracy's legal system today, including the US Constitution. The Magna Carta was the template for the Constitution of the United States of America. Harvard had an original Magna Carta from 1300, one of only about 6 known to still exist, and it had been gathering dust in their library since before color TV. How does anyone misplace the Magna Carta? Come on, Harvard, get your act together. Throughout the 1200s, kings kept reissuing the Magna Carta like software updates. They tweaked it bit by bit, and a final version came in 1300, courtesy of King Edward I. He had about 30 fresh copies made and mailed them around the kingdom. 6 of those were known to survive. Until now. Now, there are 7. The genius behind this find is Professor David Carpenter of King's College London. He was poking around Harvard Law's archives when he noticed a dusty document. It was believed to be a harmless 1327 copy, bought in 1946 for $27.50 from London bookseller Sweet and Maxwell. Man, is inflation out of control? That's less than a decent dinner these days. For a Magna Carta, Carpenter snapped a few photos and emailed them to his colleague, Professor Nicholas Vincent of the University of East Anglia. Vincent took one look and practically yelled through the screen, "That's an original!" But how did it end up lost inside Harvard? Records suggest the document was sold at a Sotheby's auction in 1945 by none other than Air Vice Marshal Forcer Sammy Maynard, a World War I flying ace. Maynard may have inherited the Magna Carta from John and Thomas Clarkson, famed abolitionists who were tied with William Lowther, Lord of Appleby. Appleby was one of the towns that received one of the original copies in 1300. Now that's some fine detective work. The only unknown is who bought the document and why it was lost for so long. Harvard is now understandably holding on to their historical jackpot, a document once purchased for less than a tank of gas and now recognized as a priceless piece of constitutional history. If you found a Magna Carta, what would you do with it? Hang it on the wall or sell it and retire on a beach somewhere? Let me know in the comments. A military disaster. It started with a construction crew renovating a football pitch in Vienna. It ended with archaeologists unearthing a mass grave of Roman soldiers, tangled in death, wounded in battle, and buried hastily beneath what would one day become suburban real estate and weekend soccer practice. Welcome to simmering Austria, where ancient history is totally brutal. Workers digging beneath a sports field hit something hard, and it wasn't a sprinkler system. They stumbled upon a 16-foot-long pit filled with the skeletal remains of over 150 Roman soldiers. Many of them were young men aged 20 to 30, their limbs twisted together like a collapsed pile of mannequins. These weren't dignified burials by any stretch of the imagination. These were bodies dumped in a rush, in the aftermath of a military disaster, one that has eluded history until now. Dr. Christina Adler-Wolfel, lead archaeologist and head of Vienna's Department of Urban Archaeology, called it a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And that's not archaeological hype. This is one of the only known Roman battlefield graves from the 1st or 2nd century with fully intact skeletons. For 2,000 years, these soldiers lay beneath the grass, unmarked and forgotten, until now. Examination showed the men died violently, not from disease or punishment. Their skulls, pelvises, and torsos were riddled with wounds from Roman-era weaponry, things like spears, daggers, swords, and iron bolts. Some injuries were so precise they almost seemed surgical. Others were blunt, chaotic, and indicated close, messy fighting. Researchers ruled out executions and epidemics. They said this was combat, a catastrophic one. One iron spearhead was still lodged in a soldier's hip. Another was buried among scale armor fragments, hobnails from Roman boots, and a few helmet cheek guards, which were standard issue for Rome's front lines. But for a grave of over 150 soldiers, the absence of weapons was telling. They'd likely been looted after the battle, their gear stripped before their bodies were shoveled into the earth. So what happened? There are no records of it in the history books. The whole incident is a mystery. Carbon dating put the death toll sometime between 80 and 230 AD, but Adler-Wolfel narrowed it down to around 92 AD. And you know what was happening at that time in Europe? It was the Germanic Wars of Emperor Domitian's reign. Roman legions were being sent to the Danube River to fight against the fierce Germanic tribes. Unfortunately, a lot of these skirmishes and full-on battles were never written down. Or if they were, they are now lost footnotes in dusty Roman documents that no one will ever read. They're probably lost in Harvard's archive somewhere. No physical battlefield from this epic period has ever been found. Until now. Also interesting is that this gruesome graveyard may also mark the moment modern-day Vienna, once known as Vindobona, began its transformation from minor military post to full-scale Roman fortress. And now it's one of the most luxurious cities in Europe. An ancient pyramid. High above the Judean desert, where the wind carves through silence and stone, a mysterious pyramid has been found, and it's got everyone in tangles. The curious structure has revealed a tale that stretches from Greek bureaucrats to Roman gravediggers. This isn't the kind of pyramid built by a pharaoh. This is something altogether different. The issue is that no one can figure out what it means. All they know is that it is very, very important. Unearthed just north of Israel's Zohar Valley, perched on a dusty hill near the Dead Sea, this Hellenistic-era structure stunned archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority when they realized it wasn't just a pile of big rocks. It looks like a pile of rocks, but it is, in fact, a fortress. A triangular-shaped fortress constructed with hand-cut stones weighing over 400 pounds each. Don't ask me how they moved the stones. Your guess is as good as mine. Once they realized it was artificial, archaeologists thought maybe it could be a tomb. But as researchers Matan Toledano, Eitan Klein, and Amir Ganor dug deeper, they realized they had stumbled onto something far more unusual. They now suspect the pyramid fortress was, this is really going to surprise you, a tax station. It was a place where officials, likely Greek, collected taxes in the form of tolls from travelers moving between Edom in modern-day Jordan and the bustling port city of Gaza. You know how you have to pay a toll to cross some bridges or get on a highway? Be it paid to a troll or a really bored-looking person in a toll booth or just with your sun pass. This was the same thing. Not quite as dramatic as a tomb, but still a great glimpse into the reality of ancient life. People probably complained about tolls back then too. Just goes to show, some things never change. This has been the biggest find in the region all year. Then archaeologists went inside the structure and things got even crazier. They found bronze coins stamped with the emblems of both the Ptolemaic and Seleucid dynasties. They found Greek papyri and possibly tax documents. There were also a lot of random bits of old stuff, like furniture fragments, bronze vessels, colored beads, and even a button and a sewing needle. This place wasn't just a stopover, said Klein, it was an operation. You passed through here and someone made sure you paid up. If you didn't, the consequences would be very real. The tax collecting stopped in 150 BC. Suddenly, for no known reason, the building was abandoned. Why desert such a cool pyramid? Did the trading routes shift? Did the political winds change? Who knows? Luckily for us, the pyramid didn't stay empty forever. During the Roman period, between 63 BC and 135 AD, someone returned to the site with a different purpose in mind. They converted the building into a grave. Likely drawn by the dramatic views and the solid architecture, looters had long since cleared the tomb of anything valuable, but archaeologists still found some grave goods. They were probably put there by the last person to repurpose the pyramid as a burial. It's pretty fascinating, said Klein. They saw the beauty in this old tax station and decided it was fit for a final rest. How would you feel about being buried at the IRS? And while you tell me how much you would hate that in the comments, be sure to subscribe. Secrets and skeletons in Tikal. Unsettling. That's the only way to describe it. Deep within the lush jungles of Guatemala, amidst the ruins of a city where Mayan kings once reigned and stone pyramids touched the sky, archaeologists unearthed an anomaly that defied all expectations. At the heart of the city of Tikal, one of the Mayan world's crown jewels, researchers unearthed a strange altar. Strange for a whole heap of reasons. First, it wasn't buried by time like most Maya ruins. It was intentionally sealed and hidden, as if someone wanted it to be forgotten on purpose. Inside the altar were the remains of at least 4 individuals, including a child seated upright and an adult buried beside a green obsidian dart. Strange, right? I told you. But get this, both the green dart and the upright seated position are distinct burial styles from over 600 miles away. These types of burials were typical of Teotihuacan, the sprawling ancient metropolis near modern-day Mexico City, a metropolis even more mysterious than Cairo's pyramids, partly because no one knows who built it, and a lot of people think Teotihuacan was originally occupied by aliens. But, that goes for most ancient things. The Tikal altar was not built by the Maya. It was built by a totally different culture, whose influence was deadly. According to a study recently published in the journal Antiquity, the altar dates to the 5th century AD, a time when Tikal was caught in a storm of political chaos. Excavations starting in 2019 revealed the altar tucked inside a Teotihuacan-style house, with 4 vividly painted panels showing figures wearing nose bars and elaborate headdresses. These are linked to central Mexico's storm god Tlaloc. They have nothing to do with the Maya pantheon. According to co-author Stephen Houston, a Maya civilization expert from Brown University, the altar shows that Teotihuacan elites weren't just visitors in Tikal. They brought their rituals, their symbols, and their dead with them. This was apparently a time of real turbulence in Tikal. Teotihuacan wasn't just influencing the city, they were inside it, shaping its sacred spaces. This is incredible news because it shows that the Maya may have been at the mercy of these mysterious people from Teotihuacan. Either that or they were in cahoots. No one can say for sure whether these two cultures were involved in a shaky alliance or if the Maya were occupied by an enemy. Around 550 AD, the altar and the surrounding structures were buried intentionally to erase them. Why? Dr. Andrew Schur thinks the Maya treated the foreign altar like a memorial. They buried it and stayed away from it, perhaps due to a falling out between the empires. What do you think happened? Were the Maya controlled by a shadow kingdom to the north? Were they just diplomats? Both civilizations were in ruins by 1000 AD, so something huge must have happened. The biggest find in Egypt since King Tut. You hear it all the time. It's a once-in-a-century discovery, but in this case, it actually is. It started with a rumor and ended with what might be the biggest gotcha moment in archaeology since Howard Carter stumbled upon King Tut's treasure-filled man cave in 1922. This is the biggest tomb discovery in Egypt in 100 years. 2025 has been killer for Egyptologists, and I'm loving it. For over 3,500 years, the resting place of Pharaoh Thutmose II was like that sock you drop behind the dryer. gone, forgotten, and impossible to reach. Then, in 2022, archaeologists pulled back the curtain in western Thebes, near the legendary Valley of the Kings, where gods, pharaohs, and enough sand to exfoliate your soul reside. But it wasn't until early this year that Egypt officially confirmed what they had found. Tomb C4 belonged to none other than Thutmose II. The grave of one of Egypt's A-tier kings was finally found. How did they figure it out? Did the ghost of Hatshepsut whisper coordinates in someone's dream? Sadly, no, but archaeologists did find fragments of alabaster jars with inscriptions of Thutmose II and his main squeeze/half-sister, Queen Hatshepsut. We won't get into the nasty particulars of that relationship today, but let me know if you want to hear about it in another video. But wait a second. Why is finding Thutmose II's tomb so important? Who was this guy? Thutmose II wasn't just some pyramid poser. He ruled during Egypt's 18th dynasty in the 2nd millennium BC, a solid 1,000 years before Rome even thought about gladiator games. Born to Thutmose I and a secondary queen named Mut-Nofret, he married his half-sister Hatshepsut, which was not weird back then and more of a keep the crown in the bloodline kind of thing. He smacked down a rebellion in Nubia, sent troops to rough up nomads in Palestine, and managed to squeeze in a little temple building at Karnak before his untimely exit. No one knows how he died, but after his death, scholars do know his body was quietly moved to a royal cache, hidden somewhere, and his son, who was still an actual baby, was made king. But babies can't rule. It was Queen Hatshepsut who ran the country for the infant monarch, immortalizing her as one of the greatest female rulers of Egypt ever. Hatshepsut's name is renowned across the world, but few have ever heard of her husband, Thutmose. Now that his tomb is found, Thutmose II is probably going to get a lot more famous. However, his tomb is kind of a letdown compared to King Tut's. King Tut's burial chamber was bursting with treasure. Thutmose II's tomb was wrecked by centuries of flooding. There's nothing really in it but soggy mummy wrappings, rubble, and some busted jars. In case you were wondering, Thutmose II's mummy was already found 200 years ago in Deir el-Bahari, where it was likely dumped by ancient grave robbers. This was the last tomb of the Tutankhamun dynasty that hadn't been found. So yeah, this is huge news. Lost Maya ruler. For 1,700 years he waited, and his discovery would change one daring couple's lives forever. This is big news out of the jungles of Belize. Archaeologists have finally uncovered the royal burial of Teka Ab-Chak, the very first king of the ancient Maya city of Caracol. And let me just say, he did not go quietly into that good night. The king was buried dressed like he was going to audition for a reboot of The Mask. He was found with jade ear flares, a mosaic death mask, and enough red cinnabar to make a fire truck blush. This incredible discovery, announced by the University of Houston, was made by Maya archaeology power couple Arlen and Diane Chase. They've been digging at Caracol for more than 40 years. That's 4 decades of ancient staircases, jungle bugs, and Indiana Jones-worthy adventures. 40 years of searching, digging, brushing off bits of metal with one of those tiny archaeologist brushes. But nothing compares to this discovery. It's the best thing they've found in almost half a century. But to truly appreciate the king, we need to understand the city he built, Caracol, which means snail. Caracol was a city that surpassed other Maya cities. At its peak in the 6th and 7th centuries AD, it was the New York City of the Maya world. That means it was huge, complex, and bursting with drama. Imagine towering pyramids, crowded palaces, bloody ball courts, and enough temples to start a divine game of Monopoly. When the Chases decided to reopen a burial chamber in the northeast Acropolis, one they'd already poked at a bit in 1993, they didn't expect much. But a few extra feet of digging revealed a hidden lower tomb. They'd come to this place 30 years ago and stopped digging just inches from the jackpot. I can't begin to imagine how frustrating that must have been to find that out. But it's like they say, better late than never. In the blink of an eye, Caracol's founding king was brought back into the land of the living. Well, his corpse at least. I mean, he isn't a zombie. Tekabchak, who took the throne in 331 AD, was buried like a god. His entire tomb was dusted in cinnabar like someone was trying to paint the walls with blood. This vibrant red mineral, a luxury item to the Maya, was rarely found in such quantities. The sheer amount of it in Tekabchak's tomb was a clear marker of his royal status. The tomb was also loaded with grave goods, mostly painted ceramics, carved bone tubes, and enough jade to impress a Chinese emperor. Based on his physical remains, the researchers believe he stood around 5'7" and was likely quite old when he died. How do they know he was old? How else? He had no teeth left. But who needs molars when you've got a custom jade death mask? This discovery marks the first royal tomb ever found at Caracol, and it might completely reshape what the experts know about how the city rose to power. After all, when the founder of your dynasty shows up buried like a gem-studded god king, you know you've got stories left to tell. Ancient Egyptian skyscrapers. Archaeologists just dropped a bombshell in the Egyptian desert. In the middle of Tel El Farain, an ancient place once known under the name Emet, researchers from the University of Manchester and the University of Sadat City uncovered ancient high-rises, as in real skyscrapers. Who would have thought the ancient Egyptians were the ones who invented apartment living, long before millennials made it cool? Using satellite imagery and remote sensing, because old-school digging is so 20th century, the team of researchers spotted ancient mud brick clusters. These clusters turned out to be multi-story tower houses, the ancient version of a condo complex. And no, there were no elevators or escalators. You had to take the stairs. It was a whole neighborhood of high-rising real estate dating to the days of the Ptolemaic rulers, from 332 to 30 BC. That was the age when Cleopatra was seducing Caesar and taking milk baths. According to Egyptologist Dr. Nikki Nielsen, these structures show that Emet was a happening place. It was urban, crowded, and absolutely vibing with infrastructure. While it may be a dusty backwater village today, in ancient times, Emet was the bee's knees. In and around the ruins of these amazing towers, archaeologists made a few bonus finds. They uncovered a couple of granaries, animal pens, and a limestone-floored mega-building with chunky pillars situated right across from the sacred road, once used for the procession of the cobra goddess Wadjet. Okay, that was a long sentence. No one is sure what the ruined mega-building was, but it likely had something to do with Wadjet. While you're probably familiar with Ra, Osiris, and Isis, Wadjet tends to fly under the radar. Which is a shame because she was hugely important. Wadjet was the patron goddess of all Lower Egypt. She was also one of the oldest gods in Egypt, established by the Egyptians in the pre-dynastic period, meaning before there were pharaohs or pyramids. By the time the high-rises were built, the processional road had fallen out of use. The Ptolemaic dynasty wasn't as interested in the old gods, not since they had their Greek gods to hang out with. Who needs gloomy Osiris when you can chill with the ever-so-drunken Dionysus? Oh, and another thing archaeologists found in these ancient apartments, they uncovered a bronze sistrum, a musical rattle used to venerate the goddess Hathor, patron deity of musicians. And they found a limestone slab with an image of Harpocrates on it. Harpocrates was the baby god, literally depicted as a baby, usually with a finger to his lips, as if he wanted you to keep a secret. That's because he was the god of silence and secrets. All in all, this site is awesome. It's proving that Emet was more than just a forgotten ruin. It was a bustling metropolis with a complex spiritual, economic, and architectural footprint. What do you think life was like in an Egyptian mega apartment? And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time. I want to give a huge thank you to Slingo SL and Iceburn for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Dino Museum accidentally hits the jackpot. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science, a treasure trove of prehistoric wonders, has a new dinosaur to add to its collection. But the story of its discovery is far from ordinary. You won't believe where it was found. Most fossils are found out in the field, buried in natural deposits of rock and silt, dug out of beachside cliffs. You know the deal. But this time, paleontologists found a dinosaur under their own parking lot. It's the most extreme version of work from home ever. Paleontologists didn't even need to leave their own dino museum to dig up a new dinosaur. The place that already has full-size T-Rexes on display hit prehistoric pay dirt while drilling for geothermal heating. It's all thanks to an eco-friendly energy boost. Nothing says geothermal heating like punching a 750-foot deep hole straight into the late Cretaceous period. While they weren't exactly expecting Jurassic Park 2.0, a tiny hockey puck-shaped vertebra fossil turned up in the core sample when the team started drilling. The bone likely belonged to a small plant-munching ornithopod that lived around 67.5 million years ago. That was just before the dinosaurs got canceled by a space rock. There's no name for the dinosaur yet. It was small, it liked veggies, and that's about all the experts can say. Other than that, the find itself is incredibly rare. According to museum geologist James Hagedorn, finding a fossil in a drill core is like hitting a hole-in-one from the moon. So yeah, this was dumb luck. This is only the third time something like this has ever happened, anywhere, at any time in history on the planet. Even though there are no dramatic fossilized claws or monster skulls, it is Denver's deepest and oldest dinosaur find to date. No one in the whole state has ever found a dinosaur bone this old. Paleontologist Patrick O'Connor believes the critter lived in a lush, swampy area, kind of like Florida, but minus the gators and humidity-induced regret. Seriously, how do you guys handle it? Of course, not everyone was blown away by the discovery. There is always at least one negative Nancy out there. Thomas Williamson from the New Mexico Museum of Natural History shrugged off the discovery like he dug up 1,000 bones from under parking lots. He said, "Meh, it's a surprise, but not super exciting." Sounds to me like someone might be a little bit jealous. Now that scientists have one bone, it's time to start digging up the rest of the dinosaur, right? Wrong. Uncovering the rest of the skeleton is currently off the table. As James Hagedorn put it, we really need parking. Would you walk a little extra to work every day if it meant you could dig up a dinosaur under the parking lot? Lost World War II ship found. Talk about a long-distance reunion. Researchers just found the bow of the USS New Orleans, which had been MIA for nearly 83 years. Why MIA? Because a Japanese torpedo blasted it off during one of the nastiest naval slugfests of World War II. I'm talking about the Battle of Tassafaronga. Waged on November 30th, 1942, during the Guadalcanal campaign, the U.S. Navy faced off against the Japanese Imperial Navy and lost spectacularly. The Japanese only lost one destroyer while utterly obliterating the American forces. During the battle, the USS New Orleans took on some serious damage after being blasted in the face with a torpedo. Parts of it dislodged and sank, but the whole ship? I'll get to that in a second. The missing 150-foot-long section was spotted 2,214 feet deep in the Iron Bottom Sound, an eerily named graveyard of war machines in the Solomon Islands. The discovery was made by a crew from the Ocean Exploration Trust, who were casually doing some undersea mapping when, boom, history popped up on their screens. The bow was positively ID'd thanks to some stubborn paint fragments still clinging to the hull and an engraved anchor, which is kind of like the underwater equivalent of a luggage tag. Getting back to the battle, the USS New Orleans was beaten badly. A Japanese long-lance torpedo tore off a third of the ship, instantly killing 182 crew members. The ship was mangled, bleeding steel, but somehow still afloat. The surviving crew pulled off a miracle. They patched the ship together with coconut logs, stabilized it in a harbor, and then sailed it back to the US for repairs. Imagine trying to drive a totaled car in reverse across a continent. That's basically what happened here, but with a broken warship. And amazingly, they got the thing home. After everything it went through, the ship made it home. According to Naval History and Heritage Command Director Samuel J. Cox, the USS New Orleans was the most severely damaged cruiser to survive the war. By all rights, this ship should have sunk, he said. And frankly, he's not wrong. Now, thanks to a robot, some paint chips, and a global team of history nerds watching it all unfold in real time, the long-lost bow has been found. It's a powerful reminder of one of the worst nights in U.S. Navy history. Dogtooth bags. In a story that sounds part fashion statement, part archaeological nightmare, researchers in Germany have unearthed a handful of Neolithic graves. These graves contain what can only be described as the most hardcore handbags in human history. Archaeologists found pouches, some made of leather and others made of fabric. And that's not the weird part. The weird part is that these pouches were decorated with hundreds of dog teeth. Someone bedazzled these things with dog teeth like a crazy cat lady bejewels her cat sweaters. The discovery came during routine construction for new power lines in Saxony-Anhalt, where workers accidentally stumbled onto multiple ancient burials. Among them were graves of women from the corded ware culture, which spanned from France to Ukraine around 3000 BC. These people were all over Europe, spreading their ancient culture into Scandinavia and throughout the Alps. 5,000 years ago, fashion was not quite what it is today. It was a time when accessorizing meant drilling tiny holes in canine incisors. People got tattoos, as was proven by Otzi the Iceman, the world's most inked caveman. And people also got piercings. And apparently, people decorated their purses. Actually, it's not clear if they were purses. They could have been bags used for gathering berries or truffles, nobody knows. Whatever they were for, they decomposed a very, very long time ago. All that survived of the bags, other than some tatters of material, were the teeth. Teeth always survive. Archaeologists found them still arranged in neat rows like archaeological sequins. In one case, a single bag had about 350 teeth sewn on tile style, creating what must have been a serious conversation starter. Heck, it would be a very big conversation starter today. Hey Susan, what's on your bag? Oh, just 350 immaculately placed dog teeth. Thanks to science, I can tell you that the teeth came from a dog breed similar to today's small Münsterländer, a versatile hunting dog that few people outside of Germany have ever heard of. I can also tell you that the dogs appear to have been intentionally bred for their dental fashion potential. Some people breed dogs to be good at guarding the house. Some people breed dogs to be faster, cuter, fluffier. But the corded ware culture bred dogs to have teeth that look attractive on bags. Now, that's just bizarre. And it gets even weirder. Although it's true nobody knows exactly what the dog tooth bags were used for, whether they were edgy tote bags or prehistoric glam clutches, archaeologists do have a hunch. Some believe they were likely baby carriers worn across the mother's chest. In other words, these were early prototypes of the baby Bjorn, if baby Bjorn was made by someone who thought dog teeth doubled as glitter. If true, it means Neolithic moms were out here slinging their infants in hardcore fang-covered carriers, proving once again that ancient people had both style and grit. Would you sport a dog teeth backpack or duffel bag, or is that taking fashion a bit too far? A medieval sword was pulled from a Dutch river, and it's not Excalibur. Forget buried treasure, this is better. One minute you're dredging a sleepy little river, and next you've just yanked up a fully intact 11th century medieval sword, complete with gold-colored inlays and more mystery than a Dan Brown novel. Meet the Linschoten sword, Excalibur's less popular younger brother. Found by construction workers doing routine maintenance in the Netherlands, this thing is a killer. What they thought was a long piece of iron turned out to be a 3-foot-long knight's blade, now proudly on display at the National Museum of Antiquities in Leiden. But wait a second. If this was a sword wielded by a knight, which knight was it? And which table did he sit at? Was it the Round Table? Dated between 1050 and 1150 AD, the sword features a long crossguard and a Brazil nut-shaped pommel, because medieval warriors apparently loved snacks too. Also, its blade has inlays of copper alloy that form a cross, and an endless knot flanked by 3 lines on each side. It's all very holy symbolism, with a dash of medieval bling for flavor. Anyone else thinking of the Knights Templar or King Arthur? Experts say this wasn't just a battlefield relic, it was a deeply personal weapon, likely ritually deposited in the river, a practice that gave it surprisingly good odds at surviving the next 1,000 years. It was found with no scabbard, no leather grip, nothing but pure steel, and it was sleeping peacefully under layers of oxygen-starved soil at the bottom of the river like it was cryogenically frozen. For us. Anne-Marika Willemsen, curator of the National Museum of Antiquities, explained that swords like this are rare, but when they do show up, they're often in stellar shape. And it's all thanks to the top-tier iron used to forge these weapons. The iron, likely sourced from the Veluwe Hills, had properties that made these swords remarkably resistant to decay. The sword's age puts it in the middle of a turbulent period in Dutch history. The Bishop of Utrecht was still running the show, but the Counts of Holland and Flanders were quickly gaining ground. If you want to know more, that's a story for another day, so just let me know in the comments. Basically, the takeaway is that this time period was when knights were switching from dramatic horseback battles to sporting armor-piercing weapons, and this sword was top of the line. It's a beautifully preserved, multifunctional murder tool from 1,000 years ago. Not bad for something mistaken for scrap metal. What would you pay for a sword wielded by a medieval knight? A 1,000-year-old mummy. Pipes in, mummy out. That's how a new gas line project went down. In Lima, Peru, utility workers were just trying to lay down some natural gas pipelines when they stumbled upon something that definitely wasn't on the blueprint. A 1,000-year-old pre-Inca mummy, tucked just 20 inches below the surface, popped out to say hello like the crypt keeper. 2 feet down from someone's future heating bill, they found ancient history wrapped up in mummy bandages. And I mean it, the mummy was totally wrapped in a bundle. It was found seated upright and still sporting dark brown hair like it just walked out of the salon. According to archaeologist Jose Aliaga with the utility company, the team found signs of a burial, and then almost instantly, there it was. Kinda spooky, huh? The city of Lima, as modern as any city gets, just sort of built itself on top of mummies. How many bundled up corpses are under this city? It seems crazy, but it starts to make sense when you dig into the local history. For example, this all happened in a Lima neighborhood that used to be agricultural fields. The mummy was already buried well below the surface when the fields were used to grow crops. Then the fields were paved over and converted into working-class housing. And all the while, the mummy remained sleeping in its tomb way, way below the layers of time. Beneath the cinder blocks and concrete, under the shriveled crops and soil, the past was very much alive. Well, as alive as a mummy can be. But Lima isn't exactly a stranger to these kinds of ancient surprises. The city, which sits in a valley irrigated by 3 rivers from the Andes Mountains, is home to over 400 archaeological sites. Many of them are casually embedded within city neighborhoods. Mummies are sleeping under markets. Ruins are crumbling under the weight of restaurants. It's basically the historical equivalent of a Where's Waldo, only Waldo is buried below the sewers. According to Peter Van Dalen, Dean of the College of Archaeologists of Peru, coastal mummies are often naturally preserved by the desert. The pre-Incans were able to make mummies without building pyramids, hiring embalmers, or crafting elaborate sarcophagi. Nature handled the rest, leaving the bodies to the scorching sun and dry sand. In a place where the summer's heat dehydrates skin as quickly as it depletes a social battery, mummification was a breeze. Van Dalen also noted that seated mummies with their hands covering their faces were a common funerary posture. It appears to have been part of some ritual, of which the specifics are unknown. As for this particular mummy, Jesus Bahamonde, director of Lima's archaeological monitoring, said it likely belonged to the Chancay culture. They were a coastal society of fisherfolk who thrived between 1000 and 1470 AD. They were all about the fish, the mummies, and living their best lives in the coastal desert of Peru. And now their secrets are buried under concrete. I wonder if the mummy is related to anyone involved in fixing the gas line. I guess it wouldn't be that crazy to think that the ancestors of the Chancay are still alive and well in the homeland. What do you think? A medieval Game of Thrones city just revealed a boat. You know you're having a weird day at work when you go to lay some water pipes and end up finding a boat older than the United States. A boat buried in a real-life Game of Thrones set. Okay, yes, I know it's 2025 and Game of Thrones might feel like ancient history, but you have to admit, finding something like this in Dubrovnik, where so much of it was filmed, is just too cool to ignore. While digging under the old town harbor, a guy named Ivan stumbled across an 18th century wooden shipwreck about 30 inches under the seabed. It was just lying there like it was waiting for its last rites or something. Marine archaeologist Irina Radic-Rossi confirmed the boat is over 225 years old, thanks to radiocarbon dating. No word yet on the boat's name, model, or if it was more of a party yacht or a houseboat, but it's definitely from the late 1700s. The boat is now under protection for further study because nobody wants a backhoe going full Kraken on a historical artifact. As Rossi put it, we must protect it for the future. Yes, it's true that Europe is the Disney World of underwater shipwrecks. This year alone has been a bit of a roller coaster with watery discoveries. Since January, archaeologists have found a ship under a former fish market in Spain and a wreck that experts think could be the remains of the Recovery, a treasure ship lost off the coast of Ireland 240 years ago. Even with these other discoveries, though, this Dubrovnik shipwreck still stands out. Why? Because finding sunken ships in a medieval fantasy backdrop feels like something out of a video game side quest. One minute you're fixing pipes, the next you're Lara Croft with a shovel. Only this is real life. Pyramids older than Egypt's. Stop the press, this might be the biggest one of July. It is absolutely immense. What archaeologists found deep in the Polish countryside is so insane, it's hard to wrap your head around it. Out in the middle of nowhere, Poland, is a series of ancient tombs shaped like giant trapezoids, and they are older than the Egyptian pyramids. They are huge trapezoidal pyramids that your high school history teacher definitely forgot to mention. These monumental graves, nicknamed beds of giants, are estimated to be around 5,500 years old. While the Egyptians were still figuring out how to make decent sandals, the people in Neolithic Poland were building massive earthen tombs the size of football fields. They did it with no YouTube tutorials, no laser levels, not even a wheelbarrow. This archaeological mic drop was delivered by a team from Adam Mickiewicz University. While doing routine fieldwork, they stumbled upon what they politely called mysterious ground embankments. Really, these are huge, weirdly shaped pyramids. The tombs stretch up to a jaw-dropping 656 feet long, which is about 2 statues of Liberty lying down end to end. Weird comparison, but accurate nonetheless. You'd expect a tomb the size of a football field to hold quite a few bodies, right? But in this case, it's believed each monumental pyramid contained only a single person. This was major VIP treatment. The VIPs were the leaders of the funnel beaker culture, one of Europe's earliest farming communities. And clearly, they had a flair for the dramatic when it came to burying their dead. And while the tombs only reached about 13 feet tall, that didn't stop these ancient people from flexing hard. Each tomb was covered with layers of cobblestones. Massive boulders, some weighing up to 10 tons, were stacked around the entrances like prehistoric doormats. They weren't tall, but they were long and beyond impressive. The only thing is that nobody found any skeletons in the newly found tomb. The giant trapezoid pyramid is empty, leaving archaeologists with an unsettling mystery. But archaeologists aren't giving up. They are hopeful that grave goods are still buried nearby, and possibly the skeleton of whoever owned the tomb in the first place. It seems to me that calling these structures tombs might be jumping the gun a little. If there's no body, is it really a tomb? Or could these trapezoidal, pyramid-like structures have had some different, more interesting purpose? Scientists may have jumped on the tomb wagon too quickly, and without a skeleton as proof. These pyramids might not have the polish of the Egyptian pyramids, but they are a testament to the creativity, engineering, and spiritual depth of one of Europe's earliest civilizations. Now for the real question. Would you rather be buried in a triangular pyramid, a trapezoidal pyramid, or, dare I even suggest it, a square pyramid? Roman road uncovered beneath Manchester. These discoveries are kind of making me want to buy a jackhammer and start busting up city streets for artifacts. Seriously though, don't do that. Leave it to the experts, like the ones in Manchester, who just hit the ancient jackpot in the city center, right next to a bus stop on Liverpool Road. What they found is a legit Roman road beneath the pavement. And while it's not too big of a surprise, considering London used to be the Roman city of Londinium, there is one aspect that shocked everybody. The Roman road is about 2,000 years old and is currently in better shape than most modern roads. Archaeologist Graham Mottershead said this is the most significant Roman find in the area in over 2 decades. His reaction speaks volumes for the historical importance of the discovery. He called it absolutely astonishing. Either Graham is a little too into history, or this is indeed a find for the history books. The site is located near Mausoleum, a Roman fort established around 78 AD. That was pretty close to when the Romans arrived in Great Britain and started making waves. Archaeologists think this road was the main northern exit route from the fort. So this was an ancient highway. It probably led from the fortress to some other important place, maybe to a port where the Romans could sail back to mainland Europe, maybe a palace or a grand temple. Nobody knows, and that's half the fun. What's wild is how well preserved it is. According to Mottershead, the road, which was made from layers of compacted gravel, has no potholes. None. They could announce that a 6-armed alien skeleton was found smushed on the road, and I would still be more surprised about the lack of potholes. The Romans really did build things to last. Meanwhile, you hit one pothole too hard these days and your suspension writes a will. The road isn't the only thing they found. The team also unearthed Romano-British artifacts dating from the late 1st to early 4th century AD, including industrial hearths, pottery, decorative glassware, and even the neck of a ceramic flagon. These objects aren't necessarily anything to get too excited about. They aren't swords or amulets or jewels, but they are the remains of everyday life in what was once a civilian settlement surrounding the Roman fort. And that in itself is awesome. What's left now is a lot of tedious research. The finds will be analyzed and eventually put on display, likely in a local museum, where they'll get the spotlight they deserve. Until then, just know that while you're lining up or queuing up for the bus in Manchester, there is a 2,000-year-old Roman road quietly unpotholed beneath your very feet. I don't know what the Romans put in their concrete, but I suspect it may have been magic.
Mausoleum inspired by Roman emperor.
In a quiet patch of France near Lyon, archaeologists dug up what can only be described as a VIP lounge of the dead.
They found a 15-foot tall, 50-foot wide circular mausoleum clearly inspired by the tomb of Augustus himself, the first emperor of the Golden Age of Rome.
And that's nothing short of amazing, because the mausoleum is one of the largest circular tombs on the planet.
Octavian Augustus built it 2,000 years ago, following his conquest of Egypt, where he defeated Cleopatra and Mark Antony. You remember those days. The Mausoleum of Augustus is one of the greatest ancient tombs ever, and now it has a twin. Built around 50 AD during Emperor Claudius's reign, the newly uncovered monument once greeted travelers floating into the Roman colony of Vienna via the Rhone. Sort of like driving into Vegas and seeing that iconic sign. Nothing says welcome like a colossal grave flaunting your elite status.
Dig director Giulia Ciucci said whoever was buried here was not your average Roman Joe. They had serious clout, and probably a direct line to imperial power. It's also the only known structure of its kind preserved in France.
There are 18 other similar tombs, but most didn't survive history's passage intact. This is the only still standing mimic of the legendary tomb of Augustus in France, and it was part of a town that may have been burned to the ground. Excavations unearthed 3 charred but preserved shops, which had likely burned down when a fire destroyed everything in the region. One of the shops was a wool-working workshop, while the other was fitted with a furnace, probably for making glass.
Ancient fashion, fiery ruins, and emperor-sized gravestones. Lyon's got it all. We should probably add it to our bucket list, if you haven't already been.
Ancient cave in a Thai jungle.
Thai forest rangers on a routine anti-poaching patrol stumbled upon a discovery much older than illegal snares. While out there protecting the animals and saving trees deep in the jungles of the Khao Noi Khao Purdue Wildlife Sanctuary, perhaps you've heard of it, they found a cave filled with ancient rock art.
They practically went into a time warp when they found a sandstone cave with prehistoric engravings, including eerie geometric shapes and a cryptic 3-finger pattern. The cave is so off-grid it doesn't even have a trail. It was only about 1 mile away from the rangers' camp, and they had to use GPS to mark the cave's location and find their way back to base. But they only went back after they ogled the art for a little while.
It's not every day your job takes you to a cave where ancient human beings painted their thoughts on the rocks. So when it does happen, you better enjoy it.
Since the discovery a few weeks ago, scientists have announced that they think the artwork is about 2,000 years old. It seems to be from Thailand's Metal Age, long before recorded Thai history even began. Some parts of the world have civilizations going back 5,000 years, with their history recorded through primitive script on clay tablets. But in Thailand, there isn't even a whisper of a culture existing until the Roman Empire was already in full swing. Now archaeologists are drooling over the chance to dig in and learn more about the ancient Thai people. The Fine Arts Office is analyzing the site, and officials are already talking about giving the cave natural heritage status.
The moral of the story is that sometimes saving animals means accidentally rewriting human history.
Frozen Viking time capsule.
1,000 years is a long time to keep a secret, don't you think? But in 2011, a Norwegian ice patch coughed up a 1,000-year-old Viking pack horse net. It was the most action the glacier had seen in centuries, and scientists were pretty thrilled. The discovery came courtesy of the Secrets of the Ice team. They are a group of archaeologists who treat frozen mountaintops like lost and found boxes, and everything is free.
The net, made of leather straps and wood, was part of a transport frame strapped to a Viking pack horse. Think of it as a 1,000-year-old saddlebag, since that's actually what it was. The strap was used like ratchet straps to keep the kayak on top of your car from falling off. Radiocarbon dating confirmed that the net hails from the Viking Age. Oh, and it's the only one of its kind that's ever been found, so no big deal or anything. In 2011, this single frayed object took the world by storm and changed how a lot of people view the Vikings. They are always thought of as being these briny sailors who ventured forth in longships and raided their neighbors.
People don't usually think of Vikings as driving pack horses across frigid mountains, but they did.
And now, this August, during some follow-up digs, more fragments of the net emerged, along with a smorgasbord of ancient gear. Over 10 years after the original net was found, archaeologists just dug up bows, arrows, and a flag. A freaking flag! They even found scaring sticks, which were sort of like prehistoric noisemakers used for herding reindeer.
And they uncovered a 3,400-year-old hide shoe, a Viking mitten, and a whisk, because someone was apparently planning to bake over an open fire while dodging snowdrifts and bandits.
All of these amazing objects were uncovered on an ancient pathway through the icy mountains, where Vikings made long and arduous trips from one side of Norway to the other. These forgotten relics are leftovers of those old ancient road trips.
And now for a quick break, because I wanted to give a shout out and a big thank you to Doris Tweedy for the super thanks. It really means a lot, and we wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family, because we've got lots of videos coming up.
Mystery axe from space.
It came from space, but it wasn't an alien. In the jungles of Borneo, a guy panning for gold pulled something weird out of the mud. Instead of flecks of precious yellow gold, he found a tiny, funnel-shaped axe that might have cosmic origins.
The axe probably wasn't ditched by aliens, but it may have been made from space metal. This mystery axe could have been crafted from the bronze extracted from an ancient meteorite. The find happened near Paao village in Kalimantan, a spot so remote you need a 2-hour boat ride just to find a signal, let alone a prehistoric relic. Local archaeologists nearly fell off their stools when this thing turned up. It's the first funnel axe ever found in the region. But they aren't new to Java. Known in Javanese folklore as Gigi Petir, or lightning teeth, these axes don't look particularly dangerous, and it's because they aren't. They weren't used for fighting or chopping firewood. Lightning teeth axes were status symbols or ceremonial bling kept by wealthy members of a tribe as status symbols.
They have a prominent place in myth because the Javanese believed that funnel axes appeared wherever lightning struck. Their myths claim that funnel axes were never carved, but literally fell out of the sky.
The whole situation got extra weird when scientists performed tests and found traces of meteoritic material, meaning this axe could have been made from space debris and then lost in the jungle mud for centuries. There's no word on how old it is or when it was carved. No one knows if it's a couple centuries old or if it was lying in the muck for thousands of years. The artifact is now being studied by Indonesia's top heritage specialists. They are hoping to rewrite the region's entire transition from using stone tools to practicing metallurgy.
And it's all because one guy wanted to find some gold. What's the craziest thing you've ever found while looking for something completely unrelated? Let me know in the comments.
Ancient Indian coin turns up in a Russian graveyard.
In a plot twist straight from the Silk Road archives, archaeologists digging near the Russian town of Suzdal unearthed something wildly out of place. They found an ancient Indian silver coin known as a jital, but it definitely didn't belong there.
The coin was minted sometime between the 8th and 9th centuries AD in what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, or northern India. Jitals were the go-to currency in South and Central Asia, but they rarely show up this far north, which is why the whole situation is a little perplexing. The tiny silver coin's presence in Russia suggests long-distance trade routes were a lot longer than previously thought. No one had imagined Indian money would make its way into the Russian frost over 1,000 years ago. It's not even something anyone was realistically considering. And now here we are. A coin in a grave has proven that even in ancient times, the world wasn't that big, and global trade is everything. The final transaction that coin was used for will likely remain a mystery. Any thoughts? What do you think a coin like that could buy? The painted gods of Huaca, Yolanda.
Buried for millennia, a wall of technicolor gods and monsters has just emerged from the earth.
In the quiet dirt of Peru's northwest coast, beneath layers of sand and time, a mural waited. A full-blown technicolor 3D wall of fish, falcons, and gods. A 20-foot-long, 9-foot-tall prehistoric fever dream was recently discovered.
Carved and painted in vibrant blue, yellow, red, and black, its all-star cast of creepy entities look like they belong in the alien universe. The artwork is so epic, it's difficult to explain.
The mural was discovered hidden inside a ruined temple at a site called Huaca, Yolanda, with the Andes Mountains looming in the background. It burst into the light, revealing stars, birds, nets, and human-like beings that appear to be shamans in mid-transformation. Cecilia Mauricio, the archaeologist from the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru who led the dig, called it a truly unprecedented discovery. And for good reason. The significance of the mural is even more striking when you consider its location. Huaca Yolanda isn't one of the big names in Andean archaeology. It doesn't even have the UNESCO cred of Chavín de Huántar or the name recognition of Machu Picchu. It is the underdog of Peruvian historical sites, the one that wasn't supposed to matter. Until now. The mural dates back to the formative period of roughly 2000 to 1000 BC. It was a time when Peru's first complex societies were just beginning to sketch out what civilization could look like.
Think pre-Inca, pre-everything. This is when temples first started appearing. Shamans started becoming local celebrities, and nobody had invented the wheel yet. It still amazes me how long it took the wheel to catch on.
Coastal vibes and celestial messages. Instead of the snarling rainforest beasts found painted at other Peruvian sites like Chavín de Huántar, the Yolanda mural has fish, fishing nets, plants, stars, and what appears to be a massive bird with a diamond on its head, possibly an eagle or a falcon, or some kind of prehistoric terror bird. On one face of the mural, you've got what looks like a shaman in the midst of teleporting to some other plane, looking like a kind of spiritual astronaut between worlds. On the other face of the mural is a winged bird stretching across the wall, flanked by celestial patterns and symbols that suggest the people here weren't just hauling in nets, they were charting the heavens. This was no mere decoration, my friends. This was the sacred wallpaper of a formative period temple, likely adorning the inner sanctum of a ceremonial atrium.
And what is a ceremonial atrium? Just the cozy kind of room where gods were invoked, sacrifices were bloody, and mysteries were kept secret.
To make things even more impressive, the mural is three-dimensional. The carving pops out from the wall as if they are embossed, not just painted flat, but sculpted to interact with shadow and sun. It is, given its age, some damn fine artwork. Why this mural changes everything.
This is a fully intact, color-preserved, 3,000-year-old coastal mural, and it is archaeological gold.
Most murals from this area are found in highland sites like Chavín, and even then, they're usually fragments. But this one is nearly whole, and it tells a completely different story than any other mural found in Peru. Where Chavín mythology focused on jungle beasts and highland iconography, Huaca Yolanda shows a sea-level cosmology. The difference between the cultures, even within the same country, are staggering. The Chavin lived closer to the jungle, so that was their way of life. The people at Yolanda lived near the sea and were fisherfolk who mapped the stars, who saw the ocean as sacred, and who blended the rhythms of the tides with the powers of the sky. And it really shows in their artwork. Mauricio and her team have now gone public, urging the Peruvian Ministry of Culture and regional authorities to act to preserve the mural. Did Neanderthals invent the bow?
The oldest weapons ever found were not made by humans.
Archaeologists in Uzbekistan just found a bunch of teeny, angry-looking stone points. They look like boring old rocks, but they might be the oldest arrowheads in the world. And you'll never guess who made them. Dated to about 80,000 years ago, the arrowheads come from a site called Obi Rakhmat and are so small and sharp that they were likely used as high-speed projectiles, which means ancient people might have been flinging arrows way earlier than anyone thought.
These cracked stone points are known as microliths, and they were previously overlooked because they were broken. But then, recently, researchers realized that these bad boys were broken in the right kind of way. They showed signs of impact damage, the type you get when something smashes into, let's say, a deer at 100 miles an hour.
At first, they were thought of as trash, just some useless bits of stone. And now they're looking to be weapons of war, crafted by people who weren't entirely human. The juicy bit of this new discovery is that human beings don't appear to be the architects of these objects. So, who made them? To answer that, simply take a look at who lived in the area 80,000 years ago. Back then, the region was Neanderthal turf. The tools look like something Homo sapiens would have made, but they were found in Neanderthal territory.
It's a bit of a pickle, right? And it gets even weirder.
Scientists found a child's skull with Neanderthal teeth in the area. This would suggest the arrowheads were made by Neanderthals, if not for one little issue. The child's brain case is a bit too ambiguous. Scientists don't think it was Homo sapiens or Neanderthal. They think it may have been an unknown hybrid, a mixed human of Homo sapiens and Neanderthal ancestry.
Now we're cooking. A new hybrid species crafting advanced hunting technology just shy of 100,000 years ago. But what does all this mean for us? For where we come from? I don't have the answers to any of these questions. No one does.
Sadly, no bows or shafts survived because wood hates time. But if this theory holds up, it means our ancestors, or possibly their rugged cousins, were using advanced hunting technology across Central Asia long before anyone gave them credit for. The Tower of London just coughed up a bunch of skeletons.
The Tower of London is a royal fortress, a prison, a tourist magnet, and now, unexpectedly, a skeleton jackpot. In the first excavation at the site in a generation, archaeologists dug into the ground around the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vicula and hit pay dirt.
Human pay dirt. They started with 2 skeletons near the chapel door in 2019. Then they went deeper, and they found more than 20 burials, including plague victims from the 1348 Black Death outbreak and 3 people in expensive coffins from the late 1100s. This is one of those discoveries that is ongoing. It's been 6 years, and the newest batch of finds was just announced to the public this August. Those coffins from the 1100s have archaeologists scratching their heads. At the time, coffin burials were specifically for rich people. Nobody could afford a box to be buried in, never mind the burial fees. So why were 3 very expensive coffins stashed inside the church's walls?
It's weird, but it's weirder when you know the tower's chapel has been rebuilt multiple times since the 1200s. All of those renos and nobody found the 3 giant coffins stuck in the walls? Really?
Coffins aside, the biggest mystery right now is the identities of the deceased. Currently, researchers are building up biographies from the bones using a CSI move called isotope analysis. It involves extracting information from ancient tooth fragments. Scientists know more about you through your teeth than your mom does, and she's your mom. One woman, buried around 1500, was middle-aged, possibly from Wales, and enjoyed a suspiciously sugary diet for the era. Remember, sugar was more precious than gold 500 years ago, and now it basically falls from the sky. The second skeleton, a young man, had a rougher time. His analysis revealed more stress, less sugar, and the fact he likely lived north of London. The woman who gorged herself on sugar may have been royal. This man was not. Still no ID on the bodies, but the profiles will help hopefully identify them one day. In the meantime, we can celebrate the other finds made during the dig. The team also found a rare burial shroud, stained glass shards, jewelry, and incense pots from 800 years ago. Some of the pots still contain bits of ancient charcoal. They were probably offerings to the dead, like the medieval version of someone leaving scented candles at your funeral. Historic England's Jane Siddell said the skeletons are just the tip of the iceberg. Experts think there are more bones, more stories, and more secrets waiting to be exposed at the Tower of London. What do you think they'll find next? Let me know in the comments. Who buried a baby in a Roman war camp? Roman military camps were, by all accounts, man caves with better plumbing. Think grid-patterned fortresses filled with armored discipline, marching boots, strict ranks, and just enough wine to keep the morale above mutiny. Roman war camps were not cozy, family-friendly neighborhoods. The soldiers didn't bring their wives, and they definitely didn't bring their kids to work. So when archaeologists in Leon, Spain, dug up the remains of an infant inside the barracks of Legio VI Victrix, they didn't know what to think. It was the first time anyone anywhere had ever found an infant buried in a Roman barracks. What are you supposed to do with this information? Maybe if the infant had been buried in a graveyard on the outskirts, but that's not the case. The infant's skeleton was found inside a contubernium workshop, a space normally reserved for tools, armor maintenance, and who knows what else. It was no place for a newborn infant, so something very sad must have happened here. Archaeologists were a little shocked, and now are trying to solve the mystery of this tragic secret from the past. Roman baby burials. First, some context. Burying infants during the Roman period wasn't unusual. Heartbreaking, yes, but not rare. Infant mortality was brutally high, and families often buried newborns under household floors, in courtyards, or near hearths so they could be close to the family. Think what you want about ancient people, but they loved their children just like we do. When a baby perished, it was buried under the floor of the family home so that the child's spirit was forever close to them. Military bases weren't supposed to have babies in them at all, let alone dead ones secretly buried behind the tool bench. These were masculine spaces, designed for marching, training, fortifying, and the occasional bout of existential dread. Military establishments were not for changing diapers. They were for building the greatest fighting force Europe had ever seen. So what gives? The answer is most likely forbidden love. While Roman soldiers technically weren't supposed to marry during their service, many of them did form families anyway, illegally and unofficially. It turns out Roman forts weren't as testosterone-only as they appear on maps. Women, children, lovers, and unofficial wives often lived in and around these military settlements, forming what scholars politely refer to as extra-legal domestic arrangements. Merchants were around too with their families, because how else would soldiers get their extra supplies of goodies and snacks? Basically, Roman soldiers had groupies and families. Historians used to think they hung out in camp with all their bros, broing it up, doing bro stuff, But now the evidence is starting to point in the other direction. Roman soldiers had secret wives and forbidden lovers in camp. And when they couldn't keep them in camp, they kept them in secret shanty communes outside the main camp. Although it probably wasn't even that secret. This baby could have belonged to one of those unofficial families. Maybe a soldier's partner gave birth while he was off fighting. And maybe someone, perhaps the mother, perhaps the father, perhaps both, chose to bury it quietly in the only place they called home. To confirm their theory and learn more about this specific case, researchers turned to science. What the bones revealed. Marta Fernandez Viejo and her team from the University of Burgos and the University of León jumped on the case. They analyzed the remains through the lab lens of paleopathology and forensic anthropology. They confirmed the infant was perinatal, meaning either stillborn or having survived only briefly. The bones show no signs of trauma, no deformity, no disease, just a tragic, tiny end. One baby, one moment of loss, but it rewrites what historians thought they knew about Roman army life. The myth of the all-male, all-martial fortress has been busted. Roman military camps weren't strict boy clubs at all. They were like mini towns where soldiers lived, loved, and grieved. The tiny, tragic secret of one infant now helps us understand the complex human lives that were lived and loved within the cold stone walls of a Roman camp. Archaeology student hits ancient gold. Some people spend years being an archaeologist and find nothing but pottery shards. Others, like Florida-born archaeology student Yara Souza, show up to their first ever dig in the UK and strike gold before lunch. I'm not one to get jealous, but this story has got me green with envy. During a Newcastle University excavation in Northumberland this summer, Yara unearthed a 1,200-year-old gold medallion. Not even 2 hours on the job, and Yara had a piece of history dating back to the 800s. The small golden object is about 1.5 inches long and features an ornamental flourish on one end. It was buried near Deer Street, the old Roman road that once connected York and Edinburgh, and now moonlights as part of the modern A68 motorway. Okay, so we've got an ancient object hidden under a Roman road that was converted into a modern motorway, and all in less time than it takes for your pizza to show up late. Experts think the medallion had religious or ceremonial use and definitely belonged to someone important. Gold didn't come cheap back then, said Professor James Gerard, Yara's supervisor and an obviously proud mentor, trying not to combust with jealousy.
Souza, who missed last year's dig due to illness, said the whole experience was so surreal that she, and I quote, literally passed out. That's fair. You spend a year sidelined, then you show up and yank treasure from the earth like it's waiting for you. I'd pass out too.
Most students find dirt. Yara found her way into the Archaeologist's Hall of Fame. Can't wait to see what she finds next. Here's to hoping she becomes a household name in the business. And as for the gold, it's just a gold piece. You know, some good old-fashioned treasure. A 12,000-year-old cold case in Vietnam.
One infected bone, one exotic weapon, and one mystery that still refuses to die. Roughly 12,000 years ago, deep in what is now northern Vietnam, something went very wrong. A man, youngish, fit, minding his own business in the late Pleistocene, was shot.
This man was shot with a deadly arrow. It was a tiny, razor-sharp quartz barb, and it embedded itself near his neck. Whoever shot him was about an inch away from a headshot. Luckily for our victim, he did not die right away. He lived for months, maybe even seasons, with the injury festering inside him. He probably thought he was on the road to recovery for a bit. Then the infection set in, got worse, and he died. It was probably weeks of miserable agony. When our arrow-pierced victim died, his community buried him in the fetal position, face resting peacefully on his hands like someone curled up for a final nap. In 2018, our unfortunate friend's skeletal remains were found crushed like someone tried to pulverize his skeleton with a sledgehammer. It was tucked away in dusty pieces in Thung Bun 1 Cave, which itself is nestled in Vietnam's Trang An Landscape Complex. Scientists nicknamed the victim TBH1. And initially, his bones didn't tell us much. But as it turns out, TBH1 was a walking archaeological bombshell. He may represent the earliest physical evidence of interpersonal violence in Southeast Asia, an ancient murder mystery carved into bone. Ready to solve the case? The smoking gun. First up, the wound. TBH1's skeleton had an unusual feature, an extra rib. Most people have 24 ribs. TBH1 had 25. This bonus rib grew near his neck, a rare condition seen in maybe 1% of the modern population. It's a quirky genetic twist that isn't a good thing, but isn't a bad thing either. Except his extra rib was broken, and worse, it was infected. The bone had a hollowed-out gap, a telltale sign that pus had drained from the wound over time. And that's the kind of detail you can only learn from someone's skeleton if they suffered slowly. TBH1 didn't die in battle. He died in the aftermath. Normally, cops have to search high and low for the murder weapon, but not this time. Archaeologists found a tiny, sharp quartz micropoint lying near the broken rib. It was equipped with a barbed stone flake no longer than 3/4 of an inch. According to Benjamin Udding of the Smithsonian, who co-authored the August study of the murdered man, the tool was especially intriguing because it didn't match any other tools found in the region. In other words, the barbed tip used to kill this man came from somewhere else, somewhere far away, presumably by someone on a mission of murder, maybe even a mission of revenge. Because let me tell you, Nobody just walks across ancient Vietnam with some arrows to kill a random person. They must have had a vendetta. A rare glimpse into ancient violence. So here's the most popular theory right now. I'll give you the mainstream theory, and then I'll look for anything you might want to add in the comments. Sound good? Someone from far away crafted a specialized quartz projectile. They shot it, possibly from a bow or a dart launcher, and it hit TBH1 near the neck. The barbed point fractured his rare cervical rib, embedded itself in his body, and set off a months-long infection that eventually claimed his life. According to the facts, this is what happened. The harder part is identifying a motive. Was it war, revenge, a Dick Cheney hunting accident gone horribly wrong? Experts don't know, but evidence suggests it wasn't random. The exotic nature of the stone, the location of the wound, the infection, it all hints at deliberate violence. And that's what makes this find so significant, and why I saved it for last so I could give you all the grim details. This discovery potentially pushes the timeline of known hunter-gatherer conflict in East Asia back by thousands of years. It's more proof, not that we needed any, that humans have been violent creatures since the beginning. On the flip side, there's a softer twist in the tale. TBH1 died violently, but he didn't die alone in the wilderness. He was buried intentionally, with care. His body was arranged gently in a fetal position, his face nestled in his hands. This wasn't a casual dump in a pit. This man was buried by people who cared about him. And that there is the duality of human nature.
The Pharaoh's Bracelet. So this discovery isn't going to go the way that you might expect. There was a solid gold bracelet dating back to 3,000 years ago that belonged to an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. It was laced with lapis lazuli, a gem so divine the ancient Egyptians believed it was spun from the hair of the gods. If you found this bracelet, what would you do with it? Do you guard this relic like a cursed treasure pillaged from an Indiana Jones vault? Or do you melt it down into raw gold and then sell it for cash? Not a lot of cash, mind you, but a bit. Maybe enough for a nice pair of winter boots and some gloves. If you chose to sell the bracelet, congratulations, you might already be under arrest in Cairo. In early September, Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities discovered that a priceless bracelet belonging to Pharaoh Amenemope was missing from the Egyptian Museum's conservation lab. Amenemope was the ruler of the 21st dynasty during Egypt's Third Intermediate Period, which lasted from 1076 to 723 BC. He's not the kind of guy you want to steal from, even if he is shriveled up like a brazen. The bracelet itself was deceptively modest. You might have looked at it and thought it was a boring piece of costume jewelry. It boasted a single band adorned with one lone lapis bead. Plain to most eyes, but to Egyptologists, it was a royal signature from Mr. A's tomb in Tanis. Tanis is a city in the Nile Delta whose necropolis, discovered in 1940 by Pierre Montet, yielded one of the greatest troves of pharaonic bling since King Tut. Seriously, this guy packed his tomb like he was hoping to be on an episode of Storage Wars. When museum staff began itemizing artifacts for shipment abroad, they noticed the bracelet's conspicuous absence. Cue the national panic. A photo of the missing artifact circulated rapidly through law enforcement and archaeological channels. The Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities formed a special investigative committee. Everyone was on the lookout for this bracelet. Forensic archaeologist Christos Tsirogiannis warned CNN that the object could vanish into the black hole of private collectors, or the thief might cook up a fake story and pass the object off as some other ancient relic, selling it at auction. Or, worst of all, it might be melted down and sold as raw gold. Spoiler alert, it was melted and sold. On September 18th, Egypt's Interior Ministry revealed that the bracelet had been passed through a depressing game of hot potato. It went from a museum restorer to a silver trader to a jeweler to a gold smelter. 4 arrests have already been made, so there is at least going to be a smidgen of justice. But the object, the relic, the piece of history, it is lost forever. The tragedy is that this wasn't even some master art heist. The selling price of the pharaoh's personal gold band was less than $4,000. That's a week's rent in Manhattan or one poorly timed NFT investment down the tubes. It's a lot of money, sure, but it's not exactly a jackpot worth going to jail over. It was not the most beautiful, said Egyptologist Jean-Guillaume, but scientifically, it was one of the most interesting. And in case you're curious about what sort of sentence these thieves will be receiving, it's not going to be good for them. They may never see the light of day again. In modern Egypt, stealing artifacts for the purpose of smuggling carries a potential life sentence. They do not mess around with their history. The Romans beneath the market. If you've ever wondered what's beneath your local farmer's market, which to be fair, you probably haven't, I've got a story for you. In Leicester, England, a renovation project in the city's central market square peeled back the pavement to reveal 2,000 years of history in layer cake formation. That's convenient. Beneath the town's farmer's market was Roman brickwork, Anglo-Saxon footpaths, and a literal dungeon of someone's medieval nightmares. Juicy tomatoes on the surface, a vile prison below. No one expected to find this. The excavation, led by University of Leicester Archaeological Services, is as much a rescue mission as it is a revelation. As bulldozers prep for urban upgrades above ground, archaeologists are rushing to preserve what lies beneath. And what lies beneath are two remarkably intact Roman buildings, one rare Roman kiln, and the 1,900-year-old burial of an infant. Together, these finds sketch a picture of domestic life and small-scale industry in Leicester's Roman past, back when the city was known as Arate Coriel Talvorum. That's a name that sounds less like a city and more like a spell to summon a really weird spirit. Amazingly, the layers don't stop with the togas and the tiles. The team also uncovered traces of early medieval life, including what's believed to be the city's very first marketplace. And it's buried under the current farmer's market. What a crazy coincidence. So, the folks in Leicester now have Roman ruins, a Roman baby buried with honors, a medieval market, and one more thing. But I warn you, it's spooky. Among the most surprising discoveries are the remnants of a subterranean chamber that once served as Leicester's municipal dungeon. This was a space so foul, it was described in the 1500s as, and I quote, a most vile prison. And you know prisons were bad in the 1500s. Historians believe this hellhole was part of the Gainsborough Chamber, a civic complex that hosted everything from legal hearings to banquets before it was torn down in 1748. Finding its dungeon is absolutely macabre, but also a perfect segue into the spooky season. And for that, Leicester, I thank you for the discovery. A lost port might help find Cleopatra. As of September 2025, one of the most elusive tombs in ancient history may have just gotten a few fathoms closer to being discovered. Off Egypt's northern coast, archaeologists have uncovered the submerged remains of a monumental ancient port. This sunken port is located near the ruins of Taposiris Magna, which happens to be a sprawling temple complex 30 miles west of Alexandria. Taposiris Magna also happens to be rumored to conceal the final resting place of Queen Cleopatra VII. The find is nothing short of dramatic. 40 feet below the Mediterranean, divers documented sprawling structures, things like columns, polished stone floors, storage buildings, amphorae, and even anchors. All of these pieces of history are still preserved like a Ptolemaic Pompeii beneath the waves. And while most Egyptologists still insist that Cleopatra's tomb lies somewhere in Alexandria, Dominican archaeologist Kathleen Martinez isn't most Egyptologists. After 20 years of tireless research, she believes that Taposiris Magna, which translates into English as the Great Tomb of Osiris, was Cleopatra's final destination. And now Kathleen has a sunken port to back her up. Working alongside famed Titanic discoverer Bob Ballard, Martinez used sonar mapping and dive surveys to reveal what appears to be a massive harbor complex, previously linked to the Taposiris Magna Temple. The ancient port is directly connected to the temple via a 4,300-foot tunnel that was discovered beneath the temple ruins in 2022. The tunnel is partially submerged, so it's impossible to move through it right now. But it does appear to line up perfectly with the sunken port, and that suggests an integrated funerary complex, one possibly built for a queen who wanted to vanish beyond Octavian's reach. Somewhere between Taposiris Magna and the sunken port, Cleopatra's tomb is patiently waiting to be found. At least that's what Dr. Martinez says. But why bury Cleopatra here of all places?
It's all about the symbolism. Taposiris Magna was sacred to Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. In a final act of myth-making, Cleopatra may have arranged to be buried as a divine consort of Osiris.
In other words, she may have ditched Mark Antony and had herself entombed as the wife of the death god, and that way she would secure a position of power in the afterlife.
Unfortunately, time has not been kind to the region. A tsunami in 365 AD and ongoing seismic activity have steadily dragged sections of coastal Egypt underwater, including parts of Alexandria's ancient royal quarter and, quite likely, portions of Taposiris Magna itself. The underwater port, announced by Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities in September, shows that the site was indeed active during Cleopatra's time, and it was connected by land and sea to her world. Kathleen's team has previously uncovered Cleopatra-era coins, ceramics, and gold-leafed mummies at Taposiris Magna, all things that contribute to the idea that Cleopatra was buried there. But this submerged port might be the most persuasive evidence yet that Taposiris Magna was a royal stronghold, and not just a religious site.
The discovery is being showcased in Cleopatra's Final Secret, a new National Geographic documentary that premieres September 25th. Cleopatra's tomb may still be hidden, but the tide is turning. Do you think Cleopatra's tomb will ever be found? And if it is, what do you think is in it? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe.
Cosmic impact.
At 3 classic archaeological sites tied to the Clovis culture in Arizona, New Mexico, and California, researchers have unearthed some of the clearest evidence yet of an extraterrestrial cataclysm, as in a disaster from outer space.
Grains of shocked quartz, mangled at atomic levels by forces no earthly volcano or stone tool could produce, are forcing scientists to expand their minds just a little. The team, led by UC Santa Barbara's James Kennett, is building the case for what may be the most controversial geological twist in prehistory. According to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a fragmented comet exploded in Earth's atmosphere nearly 13,000 years ago, unleashing massive airbursts. Airbursts are essentially cosmic shotgun blasts that decimated ecosystems and drove North America's megafauna into extinction.
These scientists suspect that when the comet exploded, the force was so great that it obliterated the famous Clovis culture, killed all the mammoths, and changed the planet forever. So, no big deal or anything.
Yet the impact didn't leave a crater, seeing as it was an airburst and never physically hit the ground. Instead, it scattered its fragments across the northern hemisphere. These fragments have been discovered at dozens of sites from North America to Europe, proving that some serious destruction took place. This latest study modeled the above-ground detonations of the comet using hydrocode simulations while examining quartz grains under electron microscopes. Pretty fun stuff, huh? The results showed that quartz with signature shatter patterns match with the Clovis culture's collapse.
What this all means is that a comet 13,000 years ago was far more devastating than anyone realized.
For Kennett, who has spent 2 decades chasing this mystery, the quartz surprise is vindication that all hell broke loose. Kennett said that after this nuclear-sized airburst, mammoths and mastodons vanished. Clovis points stopped being made. Ice sheets melted rapidly. The whole globe changed.
Could all of these things really be because one comet blew up in the atmosphere? Could one comet have wiped out America's first civilization, killed off all the mastodons, melted the ice sheets, and ended the Ice Age in one big blast? It's happened before.
Secrets of Peru's ancient lore. In Peru's ancient coastal sands, a pair of frogs just made a historic leap into the archaeological record. A team of researchers working at the 3,800-year-old site of Vichama has unearthed a clay figurine unlike anything seen before in Peru.
This figurine depicts 2 frogs joined at the hind legs, sculpted with symbolic purpose and startling precision. But why?
Found at the heart of Vichama, an urban center tied to the legendary Caral civilization, the figurine offers a rare glimpse into how early Andean societies conceptualized survival, rainfall, and possibly even regeneration in the face of environmental upheaval. For Tatiana Abad, director of excavations at Vichama, the frogs aren't just cute, they're sacred. Frogs, she said, were a revered symbol. They were tied to water and rain, to life itself.
Wow, that is pretty symbolic. Do you agree, or would you go with another animal like a salamander or a mudskipper?
The Caral civilization was perched on Peru's arid coastline, where agriculture was a constant gamble, and weather could spell either feast or famine. The frog, emerging after heavy rain, croaking as if conjuring crops from the earth, became a living omen of fertility.
In this case, two frogs locked together may suggest duality, possibly symbolizing rain and drought, death and rebirth.
Vichama, located 68 miles north of Lima, sprawls across 25 hectares of ancient ruins and boasts ceremonial plazas, public halls, and residential quarters, all testaments to a society with social complexity and spiritual depth. Caral is the oldest known civilization in the Americas, founded more than 5,000 years ago and influencing cultures that came much later, like the Chavin, the Moche, and the Inca. Even the Inca, who didn't become an empire until around 500 years ago, shared a lot of cultural similarities with the Caral. So while this conjoined pair of frogs might be nothing but a small piece of clay, it's also a silent prayer for rain. According to Ruth Shady, director of the Caral Archaeological Zone, these kinds of figurines tell stories of hope, especially in times of climate instability.
I guess the moral of the story is the next time you're in need of rain, skip the usual channels and send your prayers to the frogs.
Wampum Beads.
It took 400 years, nearly 2 million artifacts, and one very persistent excavation team, but Fairyland has finally coughed up a surprise. Actually, a few very tiny surprises.
First though, Fairyland. Not the Tinkerbell kind, but the boat kind. It's a place in Newfoundland, Canada's coldest and most unforgiving island. Fairyland is the site of the 17th century colony of Avalon, which is one of the oldest English colonial settlements in North America. The USA has Jamestown, Canada has Fairyland. For years, archaeologists have been studying the colony of Avalon, looking for anything interesting. And now they have unearthed something never before seen in Newfoundland and Labrador: 7 tiny wampum beads. They're white and purple, cut from shell and steeped in centuries of indigenous meaning. The colony of Avalon was established in 1621 by Sir George Calvert. It was intended as a safe haven for persecuted English Catholics, a remote North Atlantic outpost where devotion and frostbite could go hand in hand. Since excavations began over 30 years ago, the Fairyland site has yielded almost 2 million artifacts. Typical things you'd expect to find in a 17th century colony. Things like pipe stems, pottery shards, iron nails, and imported glassware.
But these newly found wampum beads are new, rare, and awesome. They're the first ever discovered in the colony and the first ever reported from the entire Canadian province.
To understand why this matters, you have to know what wampum was. These were not mere baubles or trinkets or the product of an arts and crafts session. Carved from quahog clam and whelk shells, wampum beads were used by Native American nations across the Northeast as personal adornment. That means they attached them to their clothing. But wampum beads were also used in diplomatic records, as spiritual tokens, and as high-value currency. They could be used as beads for your clothes or as cash. Strings or belts of wampum beads often marked peace treaties, historic events, and political obligations. You can almost think of them as wearable ledgers.
So how did they end up buried in a frozen English Catholic outpost perched on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean? And why do I feel like I ask a lot of these really weird questions?
The likeliest explanation is trade. By the early 1600s, wampum beads had become a well-established medium of exchange between native peoples and European settlers along the eastern seaboard. The beads could have passed through many hands, indigenous, Dutch, and English, before making their way up the coastline and into the pocket or the pouch of someone in the colony of Avalon. Possibly a trader, a colonist, maybe someone who didn't realize the cultural weight of what they were holding.
Or maybe it was just someone who liked colorful beads. It's not like you had Netflix or Clash of Clans to waste time with in the 1600s. Collecting beads was as good as it got for entertainment. Now, centuries later, the sacred shell beads have resurfaced in soil once trod by some of the earliest English colonists in Canada. 7 small beads to remind us of the small beginnings of our vast modern civilization.
The skull that shook the tree. The story of human origins used to be a linear, if slightly smug, bedtime story. Africa was the cradle where Homo sapiens emerged 300,000 years ago. Neanderthals were our quirky cousins. Denisovans were the mysterious mountain folk who shared our DNA. And Homo erectus was our upright uncle who handed us the evolutionary torch. For a very long time, the story of human origins has been simple. But it's not so simple anymore. I give you the Yunxian II skull, a battered, compressed, million-year-old cranium dug up from central China in 1990. After it was found, the skull was shelved like a dusty artifact in an Indiana Jones archive. But now, after 30 years of obscurity and a dramatic digital facelift, the Yunxian II skull has stepped into the spotlight with some damning things to say about our family history. This skull flips the script on human evolution, sets it on fire, and then mails the ashes to Antarctica. The face behind the fractures. For decades, the Yunxian II skull sat like a mangled puzzle on a shelf, or like that one toy you desperately want to take out of the box but just don't dare. What if the value goes down? The skull was physically crushed by millennia of geological pressure. It was deformed beyond recognition, and it had been filed away under Homo erectus even though no one knew for sure if it really belonged to Homo erectus. You can see the problem.It took a coalition of digital archaeologists led by Professor Shijun Ni of Fudan University to resuscitate this relic. With CT scans and digital reconstructions, they peeled back time itself, reassembling bone fragments with the precision of forensic origami. And what they found wasn't Homo erectus. It wasn't even close. The digitally reborn Yunxian II skull revealed a face caught in evolutionary transition.I don't want to say missing link yet, but this human-like humanoid, was neither primitive nor modern. It was something stranger. Its eye sockets were closer together than most human species. It had a low but elongated frontal bone, and its cranial capacity was much smaller than ours, meaning it had a smaller brain. These features matched not Homo erectus, but another enigmatic hominin known as Dragon Man,or Homo longi, if you want to get scientific. First identified in northeast China in 2021, Dragon Man is one of the most baffling human species ever identified. No one knows much about it, including where it sits on our human family tree. Up until now, there was only the one skull, but now it looks like there's 2. A million-year mystery.If Yunxian II belongs to the Homo longi clade, then things get weird very quickly. Statistical analysis of 57 skulls and detailed phylogenetic modeling suggests that Neanderthals, Dragon Man, and Homo sapiens all diverged from a common ancestor roughly 1 million years ago. That is 500,000 years earlier than previously believed.Neanderthals split off the main branch of the tree 1.38 million years ago, followed by Homo longi at 1.2 million. Last but certainly not least, Homo sapiens diverged from our last common ancestor 1.02 million years ago. It may sound slow, but in evolutionary terms, it's a species-level fireworks show.A mere 360,000 years saw the birth of 3 distinct human lineages, and probably the Denisovans too. Something, somewhere, triggered something somewhere. Was it environmental collapse? Climate chaos? Spicy interspecies drama? What was it that drove a rapid evolutionary divergence that left behind a splintered legacy of skulls, tools, and genetic ghost trails? Nobody knows.This one skull, found 30 years ago and revisited now, has flipped the game upside down and kicked the pieces under the couch. Out of Africa or out of date? This is the part that makes paleoanthropologists clutch their coffee mugs a little tighter. If Homo longi, aka Dragon Man, was alive and thriving in Asia 1 million years ago, and if Dragon Man is genetically closer to modern humans than Homo erectus, doesn't that mean the whole out of Africa theory is in trouble? The old model says that Homo sapiens evolved exclusively in Africa around 300,000 years ago and spread outward in a series of migrations. Think of Africa like a sports stadium, and humans are all the fans leaving out of 24 different doors after the game. But the age and sophistication of the Yunxian-2 skull suggests that the common ancestor of Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans may have emerged not in Africa, but in Western Asia. Do you see why this is a big deal now? The Yunxian-2 skull could prove that humans didn't evolve solely in Africa. Humans may have also evolved in Asia. Does your brain hurt yet? Did humans evolve in Africa? In Asia? In both? It's so confusing, especially since now scientists are thinking Homo sapiens may have evolved closer to 600,000 years ago, doubling the previously accepted model of 300,000 years. And if Homo sapiens evolved in Asia instead of Africa, this is one of those times that history books will have to be rewritten. It will mean we're looking at a global game of evolutionary musical chairs, with multiple hominin groups evolving in parallel across continents, not just in a single cradle. Forget the word cradle altogether. This new discovery points to Homo sapiens evolving all over the place. Apparently, humans were growing like mushrooms, where there was enough sunshine, beach access, and pumpkin spice lattes. The skeptics. Of course, not everyone is ready to rewrite the textbooks just yet. Evolutionary geneticist Dr. Alwyn Scully of Cambridge threw a damp towel on the excitement. The good doctor warned that dating divergences based on morphology is tricky business. He said even with the largest amount of genetic data, it is very difficult to place a time to within 100,000 years. He's not wrong. The statistical margins of error in paleoanthropology are often wider than the gaps in the fossil record. Dr. Alwyn Scully is essentially saying that the tools are too unreliable to start making any wild claims yet. But the researchers accounted for the discrepancy, so there's no need to worry about margins of error. They used bootstrap resampling, a method beloved by both statisticians and insecure academics. They used bootstrap resampling to test how robust their findings were against reconstruction error. The result was that even when accounting for possible mistakes, the divergence dates held strong, meaning their work is right on the money, and the skeptics can cry themselves all the way home. Sorry guys, time to start editing the entire library of human origins. But what does this discovery mean at its core? Behind the scientific jargon, how does the discovery of Yunxian-2 affect you and I? It affects us by changing how we see our own species. If Homo sapiens evolved in Asia over 600,000 years ago, it means we are not the chosen species who triumphed over clumsy brutes to become the last man standing. Homo sapiens may have just sort of lucked out. And now here we are, making YouTube videos and heading back to the moon next year. Forgotten maritime history. A little south of Cape Kilic, where the Black Sea folds into the contours of Bulgaria's coastline, archaeologists have uncovered the watery ghosts of an ancient harbor. In September, the National Historical Museum confirmed the discovery of a sprawling underwater port complex near the village of Bliznaci. It's a site that may once have been the maritime lifeline for the long-forgotten Roman settlement of Arite. If you've never heard of Arite, you're not alone. No one has, really. It was a fortified town whose last known appearance was on an ancient map called the Tabula Peutingeriana. According to that map, Arite sat at the mouth of the Camcia River and had its own dedicated harbor. It is that harbor that archaeologists just found. Over the course of a 6-day expedition from September 17th to the 23rd, divers registered 348 ceramic fragments, dozens of amphorae, multiple ancient anchors, and even the skeletal remains of a sunken ship. Among the artifacts were imports from Heraclea, Chios, and Kos, along with North African amphorae and classic late Roman types too. These amphorae were the shipping containers of the ancient world. Finding such an abundance of them at Arite shows that its harbor wasn't some quiet fishing cove. Arite had its own busy transcontinental port. The earliest finds date to the beginning of the 1st millennium BC. These were stone anchors drilled with a single hole, not much more than rocks with peepholes, to be honest. You can see every type of anchor used for a solid 1,000 years, culminating with the 11th century Type E iron anchor of the Middle Ages. In fact, the 11th century anchor is the only maritime relic proving the bay was even used in the Middle Ages. So, what was this place? According to archaeologists, the area south of Cape Killick likely served dual functions. It was a shelter port in bad weather and an active trade center tied directly to Airite. During the Roman period, Airite served as a mansio, a state-run stopover point for imperial couriers and travelers. Mansios were all over the Roman world, spaced out across road networks to accommodate a day's journey. The idea was the same as forts built in America's Wild West. These stopover points were made within a day's ride of one another so that travelers had somewhere safe to rest. The thing about Airite is that it's a dead end. The road runs straight into the sea, which further supports the theory that Airite was a major hub of trade. Cape Killick likely extended farther into the sea in Roman times, creating a safe maritime nook, somewhere ideal for loading cargo or hiding from a storm. Going forward, more stuff is definitely going to be found here. Excavations at Airite are still underway, and expectations are very high. Austria's hidden rings. For thousands of years, a sleepy field in Rechnitz, Austria, quietly hid a prehistoric secret. Beneath the grass, a massive network of earthwork circles lay buried, carved into the ground by Neolithic hands around 4500 BC. That's a full 2,000 years before the first stones were hoisted at Stonehenge or stacked into pyramids along the Nile. Someone built megalithic earthworks almost 7,000 years ago in Austria, and nobody knows why. Detected between 2011 and 2017 using aerial archaeology and geomagnetic surveys, the circles were at first little more than ghostly patterns in the earth. But now, new excavations launched ahead of the construction of an archaeological park have revealed the true scale of the site. Just weeks ago, 4 monumental earthworks were uncovered, 3 of which are vast circular ditches that measure up to 350 feet across. Originally, these ditches would have been ringed with wooden stakes, sort of like a really aggressive fence. According to expert Nikolaus Franz, the density and size of the structures suggest that Rechnitz was no local outpost, but probably a major Neolithic hub. With 3 colossal circles packed into one area, archaeologists now view the site as a regional center for cultural, spiritual, and political life in the 5th millennium BC. What's so hard to believe is that there was a political life that long ago. Civilization wasn't supposed to have started yet, but in Austria, it was well underway. These ringed earthworks were like mini towns. Sure, ceremonies would have been held here, maybe even a sacrifice or two, but this was Europe's earliest known version of a functioning community. Nearby, researchers also discovered 2 Neolithic settlements, with longhouses dating back to the earliest days of known agriculture in Europe. These villages, planted right next to the earthworks, were part of the overall community in the region. What I'm trying to say is that everything found here points to a shift in Neolithic behavior. This is the exact point in history in which humans began trading spears for plows and establishing permanent homes. The ruins of these earthworks are a glimpse into that critical moment in time. The circles and settlements together chart humanity's pivot from wandering foragers to organized communities rooted in place and in belief. The discoveries will keep coming throughout the end of the month, with post holes, ceramic finds, and structural remains continuing to emerge from the earth. And soon, the visitors will arrive. A new archaeological and cultural center is being developed at the site, blending ancient insight with modern tourism. So, next time you're in Austria, why not check it out? Governor Hans-Peter Doskozl hailed the project as a cultural milestone, saying this will provide key historical insights into our state, boost cultural tourism, and create a place of education and recreation for generations to come.
The Forgotten Queen.
Long before the Spanish ever bushwhacked through the wilds of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, the city of Coba was already kitted out with pyramids, stone causeways, and the kind of drama only the Maya could script. Known as the City of Choppy Water, Coba was one of the great urban centers of the ancient world. And now, after centuries of silence, it has yielded a new name to history. one that I want you to pay very close attention to. The name is Ixcha'achchi'in. She is a 6th century queen whose identity has been swallowed by the jungle, erosion, and time. But erosion doesn't get the last word in my books. Scientists have rediscovered this queen, and it's been a pretty amazing journey. Starting in 2024, archaeologists from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History uncovered a damaged stone staircase now called the Foundation Rock. The staircase, one of probably millions in the Maya kingdom, is carved with 123 hieroglyphic panels. Someone scrawled all over this thing, but the graffiti was nearly unreadable. That is, until a team led by David Stewart and Octavio Esparza matched one of its glyphs to inscriptions on 2 nearby stelae. Suddenly, a face took shape from the fragments. Researchers realized the inscriptions were talking about a queen, one not previously known to the historical record. Her name was Ixcha'achchi'in. As for her titles and deeds, they are still being pieced together. But don't worry, archaeologists are on the case right now, still working to crack the inscriptions. The one thing they are sure of is that Ixcha'achchi'in was a powerful Mayan ruler, possibly the Cleopatra of ancient Mexico. While examining the glyphs, researchers noticed one of them correlates to a date, to approximately December 8th, 573. On or around this day, Ixcha'achchi'in is credited with the construction of a ball court, an act deeply tied to political authority in Maya culture, which means this woman wasn't just a queen, she was a queen who got stuff done. Female rulers in Maya history are famously scarce. Yet during the late classic period of 550 to 830 AD, powerful women like the Red Queen of Palenque began carving out space in the patriarchal jungle. It's one of the great Mayan mysteries that scientists keep failing to solve. What happened that changed in their society to allow women to shove the men aside and rise to queenship? If you have any theories, please share them with me in the comments. Much about her reign remains a mystery, but thanks to a battered staircase and a few persistent scholars, her legacy is resurrected. The Great King's drug problem. Remember that guy in the movie 300 with all the piercings and the gold chains who was mean to Gerard Butler? His name was Xerxes, and he was the king of Persia. And now it turns out he may have had a slight drug problem in real life. Forget golden masks and gilded chariots. One of the most intriguing treasures from the ancient world is a jar. Yes, a jar. In a groundbreaking study, researchers have identified traces of opium inside an ultra-rare Egyptian alabaster jar bearing the name of Xerxes I, the famed Persian great king who ruled in the 5th century BC and was humiliated when he tried to invade Greece, fleeing back to Persia with his tail between his legs. The vase, held at the Yale Peabody Museum, isn't just any old relic. It's engraved in 4 ancient languages: Akkadian, Elamite, Persian, and Egyptian, making it the jar version of the Rosetta Stone. It's also one of fewer than 10 intact vessels of its kind known on Earth, so suffice it to say, it is rare. The jar, 2,500 years ago, was a kind of VIP accessory, likely carried by rulers or elite members of society, almost like their purse. And as it turns out, those rulers were packing more than perfume. Using gas chromatography mass spectrometry to basically sniff the jar for traces of chemicals, researchers discovered noscapine, morphine, thebaine, hydrocotarnine, and papaverine. If I mispronounce one of those, please don't throw anything at me. I'm not a doctor or a chemist, but based on my research, I do know that these are the biochemical telltale signs of opium, which means that Xerxes of Persia may have had the same problemita as the gentleman who lives in that bush down the street from you. It's the first time such a full spectrum analysis has been done on an inscribed alabaster jar, and the results leave little doubt. This wasn't a moisturizer, it was narcotic-grade swag. And considering rulers and elites carried these jars around with them, scientists are now suspecting this may have been a widespread problem. Essentially, these jars were luxury drug containers, the ancient equivalent of carrying your stash in a Fabergé egg, and the implications extend far beyond Xerxes. The study points out that alabaster vessels from Tutankhamun's tomb also contain sticky, dark brown residues with a pungent smell, eerily similar to dried opium latex. Given the new chemical analysis, it's not just possible but highly probable that Egypt's boy king was buried with a narcotic cabinet stocked for eternity. So Xerxes and King Tut were both chasing the dragon. And that means we might be staring down the barrel of an ancient epidemic, because other recent discoveries in sediment, a cemetery strictly for commoners, also revealed traces of opium. From king to squire, it seems that Egypt may have been a kingdom with a very relaxed central nervous system, if you're sniffling what I'm cooking. Just how many ancient kingdoms do you suppose were in the grip of a full-blown opium addiction? The ancient builders of Poverty Point. Some 3,500 years ago, in a stretch of flood-prone Louisiana, thousands of hunter-gatherers dragged untold tons of soil into towering ridges and geometric rings. They had no beasts of burden to help them, nor carts, nor wagons, just human hands and a lot of motivation. Conservatively, they shifted the equivalent of 140,000 dump truck loads of dirt and did it without kings, whips, or a central command. You may have even seen the remnants of their work at a place called Poverty Point. But why did the ancient people move all of this dirt to make what amount to some fancy hills? Because according to new theories from archaeologist T.R. Kidder and his team at Washington University in St. Louis, they believed the universe needed fixing. And yes, I am aware that having the last name Kidder isn't the best way to be taken seriously, but I'm sure it's not the first time he's heard that. In two recent papers, Kidder, alongside Olivia Baumgartel and Seth Grooms, proposed a radical reinterpretation of Poverty Point. They don't think it was a city, which is how mainstream archaeology has labeled the site. They think it was a place for ceremonial reunions, like high school reunions, but with more shamans and chanting and less awkward encounters. Every few years or decades, people from across the Southeast and the Midwest may have convened at Poverty Point to trade, feast, worship, and leave offerings for the gods or the spirits. Just like how once a year you tolerate your family for a turkey feast and then flee. The vast earthworks were spiritual infrastructure, crafted cooperatively by egalitarian people seeking balance with forces they couldn't control. Scientists know people from all over visited because of the amazing things they have found. Poverty Point has yielded soapstone from Georgia, quartz from Arkansas, copper from the Great Lakes, and several thousand clay-fired cooking balls. All of this hints at massive communal meals. But Poverty Point lacks what you'd expect from a capital city. There are no burials, no long-term housing, and no palaces or temples. It's honestly a little shocking that archaeologists ever thought it was a city when clearly it was a gathering place. The good news is that with modern scientific techniques now being applied to old digs like Poverty Point, old, outdated ideas are being replaced by more accurate ideas. Don't forget that for the first century of modern archaeology, the field was ruled by dudes with mustaches longer than my forearm who thought white people built everything. It's 2025 now, and archaeology is finally getting the unbiased revamp it needs. By reanalyzing shells, bones, and soil at Poverty Point, the dirt is now telling us new truths. What other sites in North America do you think need to desperately be reevaluated? Let me know in the comments. Digging up Rome. In England? At Bremenium Fort, nestled in the windswept wilds of High Rochester, archaeologists have been digging, scraping, and occasionally yelling with joy for the last 5 straight years. And finally, in 2025, they recovered a record-breaking haul of artifacts. Armed with trowels, clipboards, and an unshakable enthusiasm for ancient sewage systems, 47 volunteers and 24 Newcastle University archaeology students spent weeks this summer pulling Roman treasure from beneath the turf. Their efforts were rewarded with pottery, brooches, military gear, jewelry, and most recently, 2 exceptional intaglios. And let me quickly explain what an intaglio is, since many people don't know. In ancient times, lots of folk wore signet rings, especially the Romans. A signet ring typically came with a ring insert, which would be an intaglio. An intaglio is basically a small gem carved with an image that was inserted into the blank spot on a ring. One of the most jaw-dropping finds came courtesy of volunteer Barry Mead, who unearthed this rare red intaglio on day 1, image courtesy of Elaine Valek, which is either beginner's luck or proof that Barry is some sort of time-traveling Roman with unfinished business, which honestly sounds like a great premise for a new show. The gem features two cupids harvesting grapes from a tree while a vaguely smug-looking goat creature lurks nearby. Experts believe the image has a Mediterranean origin, likely coming from Dalmatia or northern Italy, which makes sense. If you're going to commission a custom ring with grape-stealing cherubs, it's probably going to come from somewhere sunny with grapes and olives. Richard Carlton, who heads up the archaeology department at Birmingham, confirmed the intaglios are of exceptional quality, with no known British counterparts. No other artifacts like this have ever been found in the UK. Rome may have fallen, but its jewelry game remains undefeated. Beyond the ring inserts, the team uncovered amphora fragments, metalwork, a bronze lamp, and intact brooches. According to Bob Jackson of the Redesdale Archaeology Group, the finds provide fresh insight into Roman trade, craftsmanship, and daily life, which apparently included stylish accessories and no shortage of wine. Not so bad, huh? Unless you were a slave, of course. Ancient pathogens in the Cave of Dead Children. Some archaeological finds are dazzling golden masks. Others are mysterious lost cities. And then there's the desiccated feces of long-dead villagers, which I'm not even sure how to categorize. But don't scoff at fossilized waste. These ancient poops just flushed out a whole new layer of history from the underbelly of pre-Columbian Mexico. Buried in the dust of the ominously named Cave of the Dead Children, nestled in the Rio Zape Valley near Durango, a series of 1,300-year-old fecal samples has yielded a disturbing truth. Turns out life in the Loma San Gabriel culture came with a side of gut-wrenching illness. But before moving on to that, let me just confirm one thing. The Cave of the Dead Children is an absolutely real place. During excavations in the 1950s, archaeologists found more than a dozen children's skeletons here. Why? Because they were sacrificed. The Loma San Gabriel culture dabbled in child sacrifice, as well as small-scale agriculture. And now, thanks to a brand new study involving some serious molecular wizardry, experts know they were sick inside as well as outside. Led by Drew Capone of Indiana University and published in PLOS ONE, the new study subjected 10 defecation events to cutting-edge genetic scrutiny. Using polymerase chain reaction technology, researchers amplified ancient DNA trapped in the dried dung. And what they found was enough to make your stomach churn. Every single sample contained disease. And before you ask, no, it had nothing to do with the sacrifices. This is just a totally different piece of the puzzle, but adds to the overall grimness of life here. Everyone was either sick or sacrificed. The most popular parasite was blastocystis. Known for stirring gastrointestinal chaos, it and various strains of E. coli were identified in 70% of samples. Also making an appearance were pinworms, shigella, and giardia. So basically a microbial rogues gallery of nausea, diarrhea, and general digestive mayhem. The bottom line is that the preserved waste has proven that the Loma villagers were riddled with infections. They must have had terrible lives. Ever suffered from gastrointestinal issues? Waking up nauseous in the morning? Having to lay on the couch for hours because your guts just won't stop grumbling? Having the stomach flu now sucks. Imagine in the past. But the Loma villagers had it even worse. Scientists think their environment was a playground for pathogens thanks to contaminated soil, tainted water, and unwashed food. And to be clear, this isn't just a gross-out study. These species are a public health gold mine. Think of them as ancient evidence that communities were already grappling with the consequences of dense living, agriculture, and poor waste management over 1,000 years ago. This is a trip backwards in time to when humans first started hanging out in cities and suddenly had to deal with the consequences of all of their mingling ailments. It was a cesspool of disease and infections. And there's a chance scientists are only scratching the surface. As co-author Joe Brown of UNC noted, many pathogens might have decayed beyond detectability. What remains is likely just the hardened residue of a much nastier microbial reality, which means they were even sicker than they seem. So next time you complain about your tap water being yucky or you avoid a sketchy salad bar, just remember that ancient humans in Mexico dealt with true gut-destroying pathogens so that you could eat Taco Bell without ending up in a coffin. Göbekli Tepe goes domestic. Göbekli Tepe has long been hailed as the world's oldest cult center. the oldest temple complex ever built by human hands. And now, this 12,000-year-old site in southeastern Turkey has just gotten a bit more cozy. For decades, the surface of Göbekli Tepe has baffled archaeologists with its towering T-shaped limestone pillars, stone enclosures, and headless anthropomorphic statues that somehow look like Halloween decorations. But now, thanks to a flurry of subsurface scanning, experts have evidence that the Neolithic humans of Turkey may not have just gathered at Göbekli Tepe for ceremonies, but they may have lived there too. A recent investigation has revealed traces of rectangular structures on the eastern and southern slopes of the mound. They appear to be early domestic dwellings, and that changes the game entirely. It's like starting off playing basketball and suddenly you're in a tennis match. If humans lived at Göbekli Tepe, that means it was a city, not just a vast temple. And you know what that means, right? This place is 12,000 years old. If it was a city, it means civilization predates Egypt by around 7,000 years. So what happened between the fall of Göbekli Tepe and the rise of Mesopotamia and the Nile? Something to think about for sure. This amazing breakthrough came after the careful removal of olive trees, which opened up the terrain for proper geomagnetic, LiDAR, and ground-penetrating radar surveys. What the team found under the surface would make any Neolithic zoning committee proud. There were rectangular floor plans, distinct from the site's more famous circular cult enclosures. These were most likely everyday living spaces, like the world's first houses. The technical muscle for the discovery came courtesy of Professor Barbara Horace and her Austrian team. They digitally mapped the newly found dwellings along with some larger, previously unseen building tucked beneath the surface. And these, my friends, aren't just glorified storage sheds. They point to permanent human occupation, suggestive of houses, civic buildings, shops, and everything else you'd expect in a city, Neolithic or otherwise. And as if that weren't enough, 2025's excavation season also gifted archaeologists with another dramatic flourish. They found a life-size human statue between enclosures B and D. With its defined head and torso, it joins the pantheon of Göbekli Tepe's eerie statues, like the life-size wild boar statue found in 2023. To this day, no one has any idea what the statues honored, represented, or warned against. Göbekli Tepe as a whole is one big mystery, and now it turns out the place has suburbs buried underneath the boar statues. What else is happening over there? The storm that destroyed an ancient Alaskan city. When Typhoon Halong barged into western Alaska in October, it didn't just knock over a few fences. It swallowed 60 feet of coastline like it was snacking on history. And tragically, one of the storm's main courses was Nunalek, a priceless archaeological site that once housed a thriving Yupik village from 1300 to 1650. If you've ever wondered what 1,000 years of cultural heritage looks like being dragged into the sea, Typhoon Halong just provided the answer. I'd like you to meet the people of Quinhagak, the nearby village that didn't sink. Rather than sit back and wring their hands while their heritage floated away like a paper boat down the gutter, Quinhagak's residents hit the beach, and not for sunbathing. Locals, some of whom have Yupik ancestry tied directly to this land, began combing the storm-blasted shoreline for any sign of their dislodged history. And wow, did they deliver! Over 1,000 cultural objects have been saved so far, including a full wooden mask with original paint still on it, which frankly has survived more weather than most of us ever will. Meanwhile, Rick Knecht, archaeologist and permafrost whisperer from the Anchorage Museum, estimates that as many as 100,000 artifacts may now be somewhere in the Bering Sea. Let that number sink in. Combs, woven mats, fishing gear, children's toys, ceremonial pieces, all ancient and all potentially floating off towards Siberia to be reeled in by Siberian fishermen. It's not like disaster is new for these folks. For over a decade, Knecht and the Quinhagak community have been battling the tag team forces of melting permafrost and coastal erosion. Every summer, they pull ancient wonders from the tundra before it all turns into mush. Their entire world is slowly thawing after centuries of being frozen, and the landscape has turned into a mud bog. The site of Nunalek, which means Old Village but should probably be changed to Wet Village, has been one of the richest prehistoric Yupik archaeological sites ever discovered. So rich, in fact, that archaeologists had already unearthed over 100,000 well-preserved objects before the storm even hit. And now, with Nunalek obliterated, the beachcombing efforts are more than artifact rescue. It's all about saving history. So here's to the storm chasers of Quinhagak. May their buckets be full, their boots dry, and their eyes sharp, because history doesn't always sit still. Sometimes you have to chase it down a beach at low tide. Ancient hunting traps. Turns out, if you squint hard enough at satellite data and have a PhD in archaeology, you can uncover just about anything. In this case, our PhD superstar, Dr. Adrian Ollanader of the University of Exeter, found ancient stone-engineered mega-traps dotting the slopes of northern Chile. And they just had to look at their computer screen. Using publicly available satellite imagery like the archaeological version of stalking someone on Google Earth, Ollanader scanned the Camarones River basin and uncovered 76 massive stone chacus. What the heck is a chacus? I'm glad you asked. It's a funnel-shaped hunting trap built centuries ago to corral and capture vicuña. What the heck is a vicuña? The wild and deceptively cute cousins of alpacas. Each chacu could stretch over 450 or 500 feet long, guiding panicked prey straight into a 6-foot deep pit with all the grace of a cartoon anvil drop. It was hunting with all the cheat codes activated. Why stalk your prey and aim your arrow when you can just herd animals into a pit and then pull them out at your leisure? Whoever figured out this little trick must have gotten a huge raise. Ollanader identified V-shaped antenna walls built into steep slopes with strategic positioning that would make a military tactician weep. While some animals were forced into pits, others were forced down paths which gradually narrowed until they ended up inside an enclosure. And apparently, the ancient humans who built them were very hungry, because these things are everywhere. They have now been found built into hillsides, making use of natural land formations, and scattered like breadcrumbs across thousands of square miles of rugged highland. The discovery is cool in and of itself, showing how voracious hunters used prehistoric life hacks to gain easy meat. But the discovery of all these traps also changes the history books a little. Conventional wisdom and dusty old textbooks tell us the people of the Andes transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to a farming lifestyle around 2000 BC, trading in their spears for shovels. But Ollanader found nearly 800 small settlements, many of them little more than a one-room shelter. While obviously not cities or even villages, the tiny settlements, which house perhaps 1 or 2 families at most, are scattered strategically near the chacus. So maybe they were used as outposts for seasonal hunts, or maybe they were looked after by caretakers. Who knows? What Ollanader's mapping shows is a sophisticated, mobile culture thriving in Chile as far back as 6000 BC. And while that sounds ancient, and indeed it is, it's still only halfway to Göbekli Tepe. This was a culture who treasured their hunting prowess and continued the hunt even when agriculture showed up to the party. These guys were multitaskers. They hunted wild vicuña, planted crops when it made sense, and built logistical outposts to maintain the system. The next step is dating the traps, since no one knows exactly how ancient they are. Some even think they could be from the days of the Inca, making them no more than 500 years old. Then again, Dr. Ollanader suspects they could be thousands of years old, possibly even the earliest examples of mega-trap systems in the Andes. Cool, right? But not as cool as what's coming up next. I want to take a break from dusty old rocks to look at some dusty old dinosaur bones. The dinosaur that came in from the cold. For decades, paleontologists waved off Nanotyrannus as a juvenile T-Rex. They thought it was nothing but a lanky, lightly built preteen version of the Dino King. Awkward, toothy, and waiting for a growth spurt that would never come. But in 2025, science finally called the bluff. A new blockbuster paper by Lindsay Zano and James Napoli flipped the Tyrannosaur family tree upside down. Nanotyrannus, it turns out, wasn't a phase. It wasn't a kid. It wasn't even a Tyrannosaurus. The creature's identity has been wrong all these years. Nanotyrannus was something else entirely, as in its own adult predator, with at least 2 distinct species. There was N. lancensis and the newly described N. lithaeus, both living side by side with T-Rex in the late Cretaceous. The smoking gun in the research was the now legendary dueling dinosaurs fossil. This thing is awesome. It's a pristine scene of prehistoric Bosch murder in which a Nanotyrannus and a Triceratops went down in mutual destruction. It's called the dueling dinosaurs fossil because somehow these 2 titans were preserved still locked in deadly combat. Analysis of the fossil showed the Nanotyrannus' bones bore the signs of maturity, so it wasn't a baby. No baby teeth, no growing pains, just a grown predator who couldn't quite finish his dinner. The implications of this revelation are brutal, and a lot of people are upset. For years, everyone thought Nanotyrannus was a juvenile T-Rex. As such, it became a major part of studies on T-Rex growth stages, behavior, and biomechanics. These studies, many built on Nanotyrannus fossils, are now officially junk science. All the scientists who put all their effort into studying the fossil, connecting the dots, spilling coffee on their lab coats, it was all for nothing. It was like realizing your cat is actually a hamster and your life is a sham. Both species of Nanotyrannus were hiding in plain sight for decades. N. lithaeus was also misidentified as an immature Rex, but rather than being involved in studies, it languished in museum drawers like a misfiled tax form, up until Zano and Napoli blew off the dust and rewrote the book. But what about the differences between a real Tyrannosaur and Nanotyrannus? Nano had longer fingers, bigger claws, a narrower snout, more teeth, different sinuses, and longer legs. So like a T-Rex, but with a bit more dexterity. Picture a dinosaurian cheetah with a murder bird's head and you're on the right track. It didn't stomp the ground like a T-Rex, but rather danced across the plains on its long legs. The changes aren't over yet, and there could be more academic agony incoming. Because according to the researchers, other tyrannosaurid fossils like Dryptosaurus and Appalachosaurus may also be misclassified Nanotyrannus. What's emerging is not just one lone teenage misfit, but a whole forgotten clade of fast, graceful predators lurking in the Cretaceous shadows. It really makes you wonder how many other dinosaurs have been misclassified and nobody knows. As for Zano and Napoli, they are bracing for backlash. They recognize that their study undermines a nearly uniform consensus across paleontology. But in the end, you can't argue with science, not even if it means redoing your homework. The Celtic grave without honor. She was young, likely a teenager, buried face down, alone, and seemingly discarded in a pit with no offerings, no memorial, and no farewell. Her wrists may have been bound, her identity may have been stricken from the record. This girl's story has remained unknown until now, but it is not one for the faint of heart. You've been warned. In the rolling countryside of Dorset, England, archaeologists from Bournemouth University have unearthed what may be the latest in a disturbing pattern of Iron Age ritual killings by the Celtic Durotriges tribe. Found during filming for Sandy Toksvig's Hidden Wonders, this latest skeleton adds to a growing dossier of women and girls who were buried face down in isolated graves, possibly after being sacrificed. Lead archaeologist Dr. Miles Russell said, "There is a sense that she was thrown in." Even 2,000 years later, looking at her grave gives you the overwhelming sense that this person was treated as a piece of actual trash. But why? What could a young girl have possibly done to receive such treatment? With no grave goods and the body crumpled in an undignified sprawl, the site lacks every marker of a ceremonial burial. The girl appears to have been dropped into an abandoned pit with her hands tied in front. And she wasn't alone. In 2024, another face-down teenage girl was discovered nearby. In 2010, a young woman was found in a similar posture with her throat slashed, and that's not even counting how many similar burials have been found but not connected to this larger grim pattern. And it doesn't account for how many bound and murdered girls might still be buried in the muck. So, are we dealing with an ancient serial killer? Or was this some strange aspect of the Durotriges? And while I'm asking questions, who were the Durotriges? I didn't know, so I had to look it up. The Durotriges were a specific group of Celtic people who lived during the Iron Age, one of many subsets of the larger Celtic culture. And like the other groups, they organized themselves along maternal lines. What this means is that clans were built through the mother, not the father. So the son isn't going to take over the family business or inherit the throne. The daughter is. Which makes this whole young girl sacrifice/murder debacle all the more jarring. Dr. Miles Russell has a theory. He thinks the sacrificed teens may have been outsiders. They may have been from other Celtic tribes and had no relation to the maternal line of whichever tribe they ended up with. And so, in a time of stress, when ritual was necessary, the outsiders drew the short straw. They were disposable and treated as such. But of course, that's just a theory. The truth is, no one knows what the girls were sacrificed for. Were they offerings to appease angry gods, scapegoats during tribal turmoil, victims of war or drought or political unrest? It's a huge question mark. The only thing Dr. Russell can say for certain is that these weren't burials of love. They were burials of fear, power, or perhaps desperation. You don't just dump a young girl into a pit like a discarded doll unless something in your society is seriously wrong. DNA analysis and isotopic studies on the two more recent discoveries will offer insights into what happened to these girls, what they ate, where they came from, what kinds of violence or diseases they had. Until then, they lie silent, their stories half whispered from the soil. When there's more info, you'll get it here on Origins Explained. Ness of Brodgar. For 20 years, Scotland's Ness of Brodgar was the kind of archaeological project that undergrads dream of getting invited to. I mean, don't we all want to be invited there? I do. Sitting on a thin sliver of land between two Orkney lochs, which is Scottish for lakes, scientists found over 40 structures dating all the way back to 3,500 BC. This place is very mysterious, and more secrets keep getting revealed. It was a long project, and it just wrapped up last year in 2024. The trenches were tucked in, the trowels were put away, and everyone assumed the Ness of Brodgar was done telling stories. But then the ground started talking again. Just in case you aren't familiar, Ness of Brodgar is a very important Neolithic site located in Orkney, Scotland. This place is famous for its monumental architecture with walls up to 13 feet thick and a length of 82 feet. It was once enclosed by a massive stone wall that was up to 20 feet thick in some places. Goodness, what were they protecting themselves from? There is nothing like it anywhere else in the world, at least that we've found yet. This summer, the team ran ground-penetrating radar scans across the full 3-hectare site for the first time. It's not that they didn't want to before, but more like they didn't have the technology available. What appeared on the scans was completely different to anything else the team uncovered at the site, and they just now released their findings. Unfortunately, though, the team isn't revealing the details yet, mostly because they are still trying to understand it themselves. They did the scans this past summer, they have been studying the data since, and they just released their findings in November, but with the specific details omitted. Why omit such important details? The team says it's because what they found may not be Neolithic at all. It could be from a different date, meaning it's even older than Ness of Brodgar. In archaeological terms, this is the equivalent of clearing out your attic and discovering a door you swear was never there, leading to an even older attic. How is that even possible? It's pretty exciting. Nick Card, who has worked at the Ness since 2004 and is returning for the new investigation, explained that the anomaly lies in a portion of the site that wasn't believed to contain deep archaeology, but it does. And now the team is going back in July 2026 to see what exactly is down there. All we know now is that something was found at the Ness of Brodgar way below the surface. And if it does prove older than the 40+ Neolithic sculptures found at the site, then that is huge. It means that this Scottish island is home to more than just Orkney's version of Stonehenge. The Ness of Brodgar is just one small part of a massive ritual landscape here. It sits in the shadow of the Ring of Brodgar, considered the Stonehenge of the North.
Neolithic humans built massive structures here in waves between roughly 3,500 and 2,400 BC. So when the team says they have found something that doesn't fit the pattern, people pay attention. What do you think might be down there? How far back do these ruins go? Could the hidden structures be as old as Göbekli Tepe? That's the real question. But we have to wait until next year to get our answers. In 2026, the public will be able to observe the short excavation season firsthand, so get your tickets now while they're hot. And if anyone wants to invite me, I'm available. Ancient statues in Turkey. Speaking of Göbekli Tepe just now reminded me of another amazing discovery announced this November. High on a plateau in southeast Turkey, overlooking the vast plains that scientists have long called the cradle of civilization, archaeologists have unveiled a set of discoveries that are changing the timeline of our human history. Göbekli Tepe and its sister site, Karahan Tepe, already two of the most influential Neolithic excavations on Earth, have once again rewritten the script for how humanity shifted from being hunter-gatherers to being farmers. This latest chapter begins with a statue. It's not a statue of a heroic figure or a mythical beast, but a human face, seemingly caught in the stillness of death. The expression of the newly uncovered statue at Göbekli Tepe is so distinct, so specific, that experts immediately recognize it as something new. They believe it offers rare insight into how Neolithic communities understood mortality, symbolism, and the rituals surrounding those final moments. And the statue isn't alone. It's one among roughly 30 artifacts recently unearthed. Artifacts of human figurines, animal sculptures, vessels, plates, necklaces, beads, everything you'd expect from an ancient cache, including one statue carved in the shape of a full person. Okay, now a statue carved in the shape of a full person might not sound that exciting, but remember, this is Göbekli Tepe. These artifacts date to between 11,000 and 12,000 years ago, maybe even further back, maybe 20,000 years ago. This site is arguably the biggest mystery in both archaeology and human history, so when a statue of anything is found, it is a big deal. This is a double big deal because you've got carvings galore, vessels, cookware. It's like the team raided a Babylonian ruin from 3,000 years ago or an Egyptian tomb. But this is Göbekli Tepe. Some believe this site is the actual Garden of Eden, the exact place that Adam and Eve lived before all the trickery and the sin and what have you. Turkey's Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy said the site shows that humanity at the time possessed a far higher level of consciousness than the experts have led us to believe. That's regarding belief systems, ritual behavior, social structure, and cultural production. But why is the only proof here, in this one place in Turkey? What gives? That's what researchers are trying to figure out. This recent discovery was part of the Stone Mounds Project, as Turkey calls it. The project spans 12 Neolithic sites across Sanliurfa province. Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe are crown jewels, but there are 10 other similar sites with similar dates and origins. It's just that you don't hear about the other sites, but I assure you, they are there and Turkish scientists are studying them. Nekmi Karul, the head of excavations, described the builders as skilled craftsmen who left behind a universe of clues. He said that evidence from nutrition to architecture paints a vivid portrait of society during the period, a society that is now challenging one of archaeology's long-held beliefs that permanent settlements emerged only after agriculture. Scientists have said for years that humans only settled down, built towns, and got religious after they invented farming. But when Göbekli Tepe was built, there were no farms, meaning that humans were building temples and grand palaces before they figured out tomato plants. And that's barely scratching the surface of what Göbekli Tepe is still hiding from us. The monument that stopped the bulldozers. For the construction crew on Papura Hill, the job was supposed to be simple. They were supposed to clear ground, pour concrete, keep the airport project on schedule, and maybe complain about the insufferable Greek heat. Instead, their bulldozers brushed against something older than every Greek myth combined, revealing a 4,000-year-old Minoan monument shaped like an enormous stone wheel. Its design is so unusual that even archaeologists,
Usually the calm ones in these situations nearly choked on their coffee. The discovery landed squarely in the middle of modern Greece's ongoing drama. The nation is building fast to keep up with surging tourism levels, yet every time a shovel hits the soil, the past rises to the surface. It seems that every single construction project in the country reveals some new ancient secret. And this time it happened on the island of Crete, the epicenter of ancient Minoan culture. The find was made in the summer, announced in Athens in October, and then reported by National Geographic with all the juicy details in November. I think a lot of people forget that sometimes a discovery isn't even announced for years after it's made. Sometimes it's because archaeologists don't want to prematurely announce something big, and sometimes it's because they don't want amateurs flocking to the secret excavation site and stealing stuff. When it comes to Crete, you can hardly walk your Minotaur without stumbling into a ruin. The island is a magnet for travelers who love beaches, mountains, and the occasional Bronze Age epiphany. It was here that the Minoans thrived from roughly 2000 to 1450 BC, leaving behind palaces, frescoes, and a giant labyrinthine structure that no one expected to find. Well, actually, not no one. The island of Crete is the source of the legendary Greek myth about the Minotaur and the labyrinth, so finding a real labyrinth on the island is actually what a lot of people hope for. This new structure isn't exactly the underground megalith that Daedalus and Icarus built, but it is a maze, and it is on Crete. And that's good enough for me. And good enough for Kostas Paschalidis too, the head of the Greek Archaeologists Association. He called it one of the most important finds of the century. Yet Kostas can't say for sure what the labyrinth was. Some suspect it was a military outpost, but a more convincing theory is that it was a communal prayer site. The structure was found at the top of what's essentially a miniature mountain. It would have been the perfect place for a temple to Zeus, or maybe Poseidon. Then again, maybe it's a burial monument. The fun is that no one knows. And now that Greece is looking to go ahead with a radio tower nearby, locals and archaeologists have rallied to save the mysterious monument. Whether it'll still be here in 2026 or completely destroyed beneath modern airport buildings, you and I will just have to wait and see. The haunted face beneath the water. If you want to know how fragile history can be, ask an archaeologist why so few wooden artifacts survive more than a few hundred years. The trouble is that wood rots, gets eaten by insects, and gets burned to ash in a fire. The rare times a wooden artifact is found is when it's protected by water. Usually deep water. The dark, cold, oxygen-deprived water of deep lakes and deep oceans can cradle the past like a wet vault. In 2024, divers exploring Poland's Lake Lednica found themselves staring into a wooden face carved more than 1,000 years ago. That face was only preserved thanks to being in its watery grave. Buried beneath the lake was a wooden beam known as a hook, its surface carved with an eerily expressive human face. Eyes carefully shaped, nose well-defined, mouth gently closed, head oval and deliberate. It is without a doubt a face, albeit a small one. The carving is only about 4.7 inches tall and 3.5 inches wide. The beam has no other obvious markings on it except for the number 353, and nobody knows what that means. You might think it was the date in which the piece of timber was used in whatever it was used for, but that's unlikely. Experts estimate that the tree used to create the carving fell in the year 967, so 600 years later. 353 must mean something else. But what? And for that matter, what does the face represent? And what was the wooden beam originally part of? Did it belong to a ship, a structure, or was it just a wooden beam someone carried around like a walking stick? None of the experts have even the foggiest idea. What I will say is that the date of the wood places it squarely in a turning point of early Polish history. The beam was carved around the same time that Mieszko I, Duke of Poland, was baptized. Christianity may have caught on elsewhere already, but not in Poland. The end of the 10th century was the beginning of Poland's long process of Christian assimilation. Perhaps the face on the wooden beam has something to do with that, because other similar carved faces have been found in other places, specifically in other ancient Slavic cities like Volyn, Novgorod the Great, and Staraya Ladoga. The fact that so many of these carved faces have been found suggests they were pieces of a broader spiritual tradition woven across medieval Slavic settlements. These faces are directly connected to the ancient Slavs, but no one is exactly sure how. Is it the face of a god, a king, a hero? According to Andrei Pidin, director of the Underwater Archaeology Center, the beam was probably part of a defensive rampart, and the carved face was a localized guardian spirit, although the key word here is probably. At the end of the day, it's all still a confounding enigma. If you think you know the identity of this ghostly face, be sure to share it with me in the comments. And while you're typing that up, I will switch gears and take us to ancient Egypt. Shoshenq III and the Case of the Borrowed Tomb. Today's Egyptian story begins with a room full of ceramic servants standing at silent attention. The 225 shabti, literal miniature servants left in the tombs of pharaohs so that they could serve them even in death, are not rare. Much like the Romans, the Egyptians didn't really like doing their own work, especially not pharaohs. Most royalty and nobility filled their tombs with shabtis to ensure they would have a more hands-free lifestyle on the other side. Wealthier Egyptians stocked up in bulk. Tutankhamun famously had over 400 of these things in his tomb, so the presence of 225 shabtis was not surprising. In fact, their eternal vigil would have been unremarkable anywhere else in Egypt. But archaeologists found these 225 shabtis somewhere they simply didn't belong. They were left in the tomb of a completely different pharaoh. They were built to be Shoshenq III's eternal waitstaff, but that's not whose tomb they were in. The discovery took place at Tanis in northern Egypt, where an Egyptian-French archaeological team was knee-deep in conservation work inside the burial complex of Osorkon II. By the way, if you've never heard any of these names before, don't sweat it. These are not your typical A-lister pharaohs. These could be considered the D-list pharaohs, but I don't want to hurt their feelings. Outside of Egyptology, few people know Shoshenq or Osorkon, but now you do. The tomb itself had been uncovered in 1939, but the northern chamber still had secrets to reveal. Near an unmarked sarcophagus, the team found the cluster of shabtis. Hieroglyphs etched into their surfaces left no room for doubt. They were definitely made for Shoshenq III. So how did they get into another pharaoh's tomb? The truth isn't that complicated, but it is a little surprising. Archaeologists quickly realized that Shoshenq III had not been buried in the tomb he built for himself. Instead, the clues pointed to Shoshenq being buried inside the anonymous sarcophagus within Osorkon II's burial chamber. And sure enough, Frédéric Peyradeau, director of the French mission at Tanis, confirmed the implications. The 225 figurines were clustered near the unmarked coffin, indicating Shoshenq's remains had been quietly relocated to Osorkon's tomb. The politics behind this burial shuffle remain murky. Shoshenq III ruled during a period when Egypt was fractured between northern and southern power bases. His dynasty was embroiled in a prolonged family conflict that would have made any royal succession meeting awkward at best. It's possible that after his death, there were disputes over inheritance or legitimacy, which caused someone, maybe his successor, to trash his tomb. Perhaps his mummy and a handful of his ceramic servants were all that survived, placed inside a different pharaoh's tomb for safekeeping. Whatever happened, I'm sure there was oodles of drama involved, so it's a real bummer that we may never know what really happened, because I bet it was epic. Upending the timeline of human civilization. Scientists have it all wrong. Ancient Paleolithic humans weren't just sitting around in caves waiting for Prometheus to come down from Olympus with the flame of life. They were hard at work creating technologies that today, scientists say, were far too advanced for Paleolithic hands. And the one place where this technology seems to have peaked beyond anything imagined is the Philippines. Or more accurately, the Philippine island of Mindoro. I told you there were lots of island finds this month. Mindoro is wedged along routes threading from mainland Asia toward Borneo in Indonesia and Palawan, meaning it is remote. To reach this island, ancient humans had to cross water, a lot of water, and that is something that many scholars have long insisted was out of reach for Paleolithic societies. Big brain academics have long refuted the idea that humans were sailing the seven seas 30,000 years before the pyramids, but here's the deal. They were. The evidence from Bubag 1, Bubag 2, Kansubong 2, and Bilat Cave in the Philippines tells us these ancient communities not only crossed huge distances of open ocean, they built lives that depended on doing so again and again. Here's what I'm talking about. Inside more than 40 caves and shelters surveyed since 2010, archaeologists documented intact layers holding the remains of meals, tools shaped from stone, bone, and shell. These are the unmistakable signatures of coastal living. There is no debating the evidence that humans were living in Mindoro 35,000 years ago. Seeing as artifacts were found in over 40 caves, it's safe to say that this community was thriving. But if they didn't sail, how exactly did they reach Mindoro in the first place? And how did they enjoy such a bountiful coastal life without fishing boats? No, archaeologists haven't found any actual boats, but they did recently find deposits of shellfish and certain pelagic fish that can only be captured in deep waters with deep-sea fishing technology. That is physical proof that the human beings living on this island took to the seas. It shouldn't be that hard to believe. Just look at the Bajau Laut tribe. Living on the sea for so long, they're practically mermaids at this point. They are one with the ocean and can hold their breath longer than any other group of people in the world. And you're going to tell me the Bajau's ancestors couldn't figure out a bit of deep-sea navigation? Come on. The bigger mystery is trying to figure out why the people of Mindoro Island took to the seas while other groups of early Homo sapiens didn't. Unless they did. Unless this is evidence of a prehistoric global society of seafarers. All I can say is that human history is much more complicated than my high school history books told me. Anyone else feeling like this? Lifting the lid on ancient Rome. Budapest is one of Europe's most dazzling cities, but what hardly any of its millions of yearly visitors know, and what even the locals don't know sometimes, is that Budapest was built on the ruins of Rome. The city's streets skirt the remains of an ancient Roman settlement called Aquincum, and every now and again, a little piece of that forgotten town is found at the surface. This time, archaeologists found a limestone sarcophagus, one sealed so tightly that 1,700 years of history had failed to disturb a single inch of it. This is a sarcophagus from the Roman era that has been untouched by looters. It was still sealed when archaeologists found it, which is absolutely amazing. Try finding a perfectly sealed lunch in the break room fridge. I dare ya. Food at work barely lasts a day without someone's fingers prying open the lid, but this corpse was left vacuum sealed for 2 millennia. The Budapest History Museum's team uncovered the tomb during a wide excavation in Óbuda. This part of Budapest was once a bustling civilian settlement beside a legionary camp on the Danube frontier. The area had seen abandonment in the 3rd century, with its houses falling silent before the ground was repurposed for burials, meaning this was a town, and then everyone left, and then it became an actual graveyard. During the dig, the team found the remains of a Roman aqueduct and 8 other graves, but nothing compared to the wonder of the perfectly sealed coffin. Archaeologists were practically foaming at the mouth to break into it, like when you get something in the mail and nearly have a heart attack rushing to unbox it. When Gabriela Feñez and her team lifted the lid, they revealed a complete skeleton surrounded by artifacts laid out with unmistakable care. Someone packed this guy up like they were sending him internationally and trying to cram as much treasure as they could into the coffin. There were 2 flawless glass vessels, lots of bronze figures, 140 coins, a bone hairpin, amber jewelry, and traces of gold-threaded fabric. And actually I said this guy, but it was actually a girl. The skeleton belonged to a young woman, while the objects were likely gifts from her family, meant to ease her journey into the next world. It's amazing, but also a huge mystery. Who was this woman? She must have been important, but how important? Was she the wife of a general, a local priestess, or maybe a government employee? During the Roman period, this region of modern Hungary formed the province of Pannonia, its border running along the right bank of the Danube River less than a mile away. The newly uncovered structures belonged to the thriving community that grew beside the military camp. The people who lived here were families, traders, and civilians in the shadow of Rome's fortified border. This was absolutely the frontier, the edge of civilization.
Everything beyond this outpost was, in Roman eyes, barbarian lands. The richness of the grave sets this woman apart within that world. People didn't typically live at the edge of society for fun. They were usually there because they were opportunists. The first people to move to the New World weren't wealthy, they were poor pioneers. The folks running to explore the Wild West and get dysentery on the Oregon Trail weren't that rich either, usually. Frontiers have a history of attracting poor people in search of better lives. So what was this wealthy woman doing at the edge of the Roman Empire with a coffin filled to the brim with coins and treasures? Spoiler alert, no one knows. The darker side of ancient Greece. In the heart of modern Athens, where cafes crowd the sidewalks and scooters hum through narrow streets, an ancient whisper rose from a muddy well in the Kerameikos neighborhood. Archaeologists from the German Archaeological Institute were expecting to learn more about the water supply to a first-century bathhouse. Instead, they uncovered something far more unsettling. Are you ready? 30 ancient curse tablets, perfectly preserved after 2,500 years, emerged from the dust of history. Whether or not they are still functional, that has yet to be seen. This is a lot of curse tablets, but it's not surprising given where they were found. Kerameikos is already famous as the city's primary burial ground with more than 6,500 excavated graves. The place has a habit of revealing Athens at its most intimate. And how much more intimate can you get than cursing someone with a tablet? But even in a district accustomed to funerary inscriptions and ritual objects, these tablets stand apart. Their messages, engraved into thin sheets and tossed into the muddy well where they were found, were paid for by Athenians who wanted their anger and vengeance carried to the underworld. The premise behind these tablets was simple. If the living couldn't settle a feud, the dead could. Ordinary citizens hired specialists to carve their wishes for vengeance onto thin sheets of lead called tablets. The tablets were then placed in wells or tombs so the souls below could deliver the message to the gods who enforced such dark requests. Simple, right? The Greeks believed there were gods in the underworld, which was, under the surface. So tombs, caves, and wells were the closest they could get to reaching that realm beyond death. By dropping a tablet into a well, someone was essentially dropping a DM into Hades' inbox. But instead of saying, "Sup, Hades?" they said, "Hades, please smite Joe. He stole one of my chickens." The even crazier part is that sorcery in ancient Greece was not exactly legal. You could get in big trouble for dropping one of these cursagrams into a well, so you had to be really good and angry. Like one person who was absolutely fuming at a newlywed woman named Glycera. On the tablet found in the well was a curse focused on her reproductive organs, made by a person who was extremely jealous of her marriage. I'll let you work out the finer details of the curse because, I can't really get any more graphic than that, but let me know in the comments what you think the cursor was so angry at Glycera about. Was it a spurned lover, an ex, a creepy stalker? The earliest winemakers in history. Prepare to have a very, very red tongue. At Gata Triligora, a very old site south of Georgia's capital city of Tbilisi, archaeologists found wine. Not drinkable wine, but the earliest evidence of winemaking anywhere in the world. Yes, even older than wine made in Italy and France. The find was made by the Gata Triligora Regional Archaeological Project Expedition, or GRAPE for short. What they have found pushes the invention of wine pretty dang far back. Chemical residues from pottery at the site place the origins of grape-based wine in the early Neolithic to about 6,000 BC. That is 1,000 years older than any other known winemaking. Until now, the oldest known wine traces came from Haji Firuz Tepe in Iran, dating roughly to 5,000 BC. When that discovery was made, it was huge. Everyone thought Iran was the place where wine was first invented. But nope, all signs now point to Georgia. People in the South Caucasus, at the northern edge of the Fertile Crescent, were making wine 8,000 years ago. And that is just nuts. Here, most people are thinking that 8,000 years ago, humans wore bear fur and, squawked around like monkeys. But if they were making wine, I think it's safe to say they were a lot smarter than a few hollering monkeys. The excavation concentrated on two Neolithic villages, Garatrili Gora and Shulaveris Gora. Pottery fragments from these sites traveled to laboratories across the United States, including the Penn Museum, the Goddard Space Flight Center, Boise State University, and the Winterthur Museum, where scientists tested the residue sealed into the jar's surfaces. Using highly sensitive techniques, researchers confirmed tartaric acid, the unmistakable chemical signature of grapes and wine. Stephen Batiuk, a senior research associate at the University of Toronto, called the discovery the oldest known example of wine made from the Eurasian grapevine, scientific name Vitis vinifera. Whether early Neolithic villagers used wild or domesticated grapes is still unclear, though the sites sit within the natural range where wild vines have grown since the end of the last ice age. That might just be my favorite part, learning that the grapes were probably natural. That means they weren't cultivating grapes specifically for wine, they were just harvesting what grew naturally. Then, over the following centuries, they likely began to cultivate, breed, and create new grapes for new wines. What do you suppose the first wine tasted like? And would you dare take a sip of 1700-year-old wine if you could? The 102nd anniversary of the big one. 102 years ago, in early November of 1922, the Valley of the Kings was still a sun-struck ravine of stone heaps, donkey dust, and disappointment. 5 seasons of failures had left explorer Howard Carter with little more than chalk dust optimism and a patron whose patience was wearing thin. And yet the clues were there. Carter had sealed jars tied to Tutankhamun's embalming, a patch of ancient flood debris, and a cluster of long-abandoned workers' huts just 40 feet from an earlier relic cache. While every other archaeologist threw up their hands in defeat, Howard threw down his shovel. He knew he was close to the tomb. He just needed a little more time. On November 1st, 1922, he began clearing the huts again. 3 feet of hardened soil, fused with centuries of rubble, had to be chipped away before he could even dream of bedrock. But on November 4th, the noise at his excavation felt eerily quiet. A foreman approached Carter and told him why it was so dang silent. A carved step had appeared beneath the first hut. It was the first step to Tutankhamun's tomb. As the team cut deeper, the step lengthened into a steep staircase, dropping roughly 12 feet below the entrance of Ramses VI's tomb. On its stone threshold sat a sealed doorway plastered smooth, stamped with the jackal Anubis standing over 9 bound captives. In case you didn't know, that is the royal necropolis seal. The tomb was still locked. Carter chipped a small hole in the upper corner, slid his flashlight beam into the darkness, and saw a corridor jammed with debris. It was exactly what he wanted. It was an untouched tomb filled to the brim with treasure. The last people who saw what Howard was looking at were probably the priests who sealed the chamber. So on this November recap, let's remember something that didn't happen this November, but happened 102 years ago on a different November. This discovery changed archaeology forever and got the whole world addicted to ancient Egypt. What did Carter find in that tomb? I mean, it's a pretty long list. King Tut's death mask, iron daggers made from a meteorite, spells from the Book of the Dead, board games, mannequins, sandals made of gold, a throne, way too many chariots, a lot of trumpets, and some nice images of King Tut and his wife, Ankhesenamun, who was also probably his sister. And with that, it's time to say goodbye. Which of November's big finds was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks so much for being here today. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up for more. See you soon. Bye!